Very pleased to be joined today by the other members of our broadcast team, Ryan Segrist and Liz Horton. Welcome, guys.
Thanks, Patrick.
So yesterday was a really full day, and I learned a lot. And today looks like it may be even more full. So is there anything in particular you guys are looking forward to today?
Yeah, Patrick. In particular, I'm looking forward to this social media and transition session that's going to be happening at 10:30. For those of you who were watching our broadcast yesterday, we interviewed one of the principal presenters on that, OGE's Christopher Schwartz, on a number of different issues. I think that this is a very timely and developing sort of thing that would be useful for all of our virtual listeners and for everyone here to get some more understanding of what OGE's take on the use of social media could be, particularly as for general use, but also as relates to the transition.
And I think, this is an area where we've had some written guidance, right, Liz, out of OGE.
Right, for sure.
But we've not had a lot of teaching around it, so this is an opportunity to maybe get some more granularity.
Right, as we touched upon yesterday with Chris's interview, it's ever-changing. It's an ever-changing area, so it's rather new. It's complex, so I think this session will bring a lot of insight and give a lot of information.
Yeah, so that's sort of exciting new stuff, and I think we're starting out today with some of the fundaments of an election year with some folks from the Office of Special Counsel who are going to explain to us what every employee needs to know about the Hatch Act. I think this is one of the more popular sessions that we've ever hosted.
Well, the reason for that is because ethics officials often wear more than one hat. They're not just purely ethics officials. They also have to deal with procurement and with the Hatch Act and with 1353 and all sorts of other things. And being able to bring experts who are not ethics officials per se, but are sort of in the ethics universe, or the Venn diagram is ethics and friends, and they sort of overlap a little bit.
Right.
So it's very useful for us to be able to get exposure to training from these folks, because we often don't get that.
Absolutely, and I think this can also serve as a resource that you as ethics officials can use with your employees. If you're trying to think of ways that you can raise awareness about the Hatch Act during the election year, you can use this broadcast or a broadcast we did last year through the Institute for Ethics in Government to share with your employees so they can learn what they need to know about the Hatch Act and the restrictions, because this is an area of some confusion for employees.
And of course, being in the middle of the election season, I think it's quite timely, of course, and especially with this election season being quite exciting and interesting,
right,
with the players involved. So
right.
I think it's perfect timing.
And I think on the topic of perennial favorites at ethics conferences and summits, we also have a traveling gifts presentation this afternoon where Lenny Lowentrip from the General Services Administration is going to join us. Lenny is always very popular, and he never finishes his session because there are always lots of excellent questions. But we're going to try again this time for the dozenth time. Maybe this time he will be able to exhaust the questions finally. But even if he doesn't, there are sure to be takeaways that will add to your practice and help you to better advise employees about traveling gifts.
One of the sessions that I'm really interested in today is we have a number of high-ranking people from POGO, from Public Citizen, and from previous administrations who are going to come in and talk about the transition and what their experiences were. I think that that's going to be a very, very interesting session, given that the theme of this summit is transition.
Absolutely.
And streaming in our second room today will be a session on OIGs and OGE. And OGE has always had quite a tandem relationship with inspectors general. So I think that will also be a very good session to peek in on.
And I think that starts in just about a minute. So if you're really interested in that, you can find Stream 2 on the homepage of the Institute for Ethics in Government YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/OGE Institute. And we have two playlists going. So this main room is the playlist number 1 at the top of the page. The second room is in the second playlist. So if you're interested in the offerings there, you might want to switch us off and go jump over to the other side.
That's right, coming up soon.
Coming soon.
All right, and speaking of switching off, our next session is getting ready to start here in just a minute or two, so we're going to cut away so that we can begin presenting the Hatch Act.
I'm going to go ahead and get started, even though we may have a few people trickling in. My name is Erica Hamrick. I'm the Deputy Chief of the Hatch Act Unit at the Office of Special Counsel. Some of you may have been expecting to see Anna Galinda Marone this morning. I know she was listed as the presenter today. She is under the weather, unfortunately, and so she had called me at home last night and asked me if I could fill in this morning. So I hope that I can fill her shoes well. I'm glad to be here today. Clearly, this is a very timely topic. We are in the throes of the presidential primary season. And so I really hope that I can answer any questions that you may have today with respect to the Hatch Act. You ethics officials are on the front lines in terms of employees who may be coming to you with Hatch Act questions. So please feel free to interrupt me at any time this morning to let me know if there are questions you're getting or issues that you want to talk more in depth about. I want to make this as beneficial for you as it can be. My plan this morning, I know that we have kind of a mixed group in terms of some of you who have been around for a while in the ethics community and some of you who are newer. So I want to kind of try to do two things. I definitely want to make sure I go over the basics in terms of all of the prohibitions, but I also want to focus on the questions that we're getting in the office and the things that we're already seeing this election cycle to kind of help you get an idea of what issues have been coming up and what you might be confronted with back at your agency. But again, please feel free at any time to interrupt me with questions. I'll make sure for those who are viewing via their office to repeat the question so everybody knows what we're talking about here. And so with that, let's get started. Just a quick reminder of why we have a Hatch Act in the first place. Yes, it's here. It restricts everyone's political activity, but it really comes from a good place in terms of wanting the government to be nonpartisan and neutral in its operations and to protect employees from being coerced into engaging in political activity and to make sure that employees' advancement in government is based on their merit and their performance and not which political party or candidate they may support. So just kind of at the basic level of who is covered by the Hatch Act, it's federal executive branch employees, and there are two categories of employees under the Hatch Act, those we call less restricted and those we call further restricted. And the difference between the two is that less restricted employees can really go out there and take an active part in partisan political management and campaigning, and further restricted employees cannot. So in terms of, in terms of who is further restricted, employees at any one of these agencies listed on the slide here are going to be further restricted under the Hatch Act. And they're mostly, you'll see, intelligence enforcement type agencies. At these agencies, all employees except for the political or the presidential appointees, all employees at these agencies are going to be further restricted. In addition, there are certain positions, regardless of agency, that are further restricted. So you'll see on the slide, career SES, ALJs. Regardless of agency, anyone holding those positions are going to be further restricted. And my plan is, at the end of the presentation, I will go into a little more detail what those further restrictions mean for these employees who are subject to them. But before we talk about what you can't do under the Hatch Act, employees still have a lot of ability to get involved in the process, even those further restricted employees. So all employees can go out there, register to vote, contribute money to political parties or campaigns. That's not covered by the Hatch Act. Attend political rallies, attend political meetings, even fundraising events. All of that is permissible under the Hatch Act. Being candidates for nonpartisan public office is allowable under the Hatch Act. And then in terms of social media, even further restricted employees can now follow, like, or comment on the social media pages of partisan political entities, campaigns, political parties, candidates, what have you. For the less restricted employees, as I mentioned, they can really go out there and take an active part in campaigning and management, can go out there and volunteer for a campaign, go door to door distributing campaign literature, even make campaign speeches on behalf of a candidate, or get involved in party politics in terms of holding office within a political party. We're getting a lot of questions now about individuals serving as delegate to party conventions. Less restricted employees can do that. Organizing party meetings, serving on a committee of a political party, all of that is okay for the less restricted employees. Not for the further restricted employees, though, and again, that's the big difference between the two. A couple other things worth mentioning. All employees are still covered by the Hatch Act while they're on leave or on, a furlough or anything like that. They're still covered by the prohibitions. So we're getting a lot of questions in the office now about employees who want to take a leave of absence to go volunteer or work for a presidential campaign. And under the Hatch Act, that's fine. Less restricted employees can do that and can go work for a campaign. But employees have to remember that they're still going to be subject to the Hatch Act while they're on leave. So for example, they're not going to be able to do any fundraising for the campaign. So the next two slides list out all of the prohibitions of the Hatch Act, and I'm going to go into each and every one of them in detail. But we kind of have broken them down into two categories. The first are what we call the 24/7 prohibitions, and these are the prohibitions that apply all the time, regardless of whether employees are at home or at work, on duty or off duty. And that is that employees cannot use their official authority or influence to affect the result of an election. They cannot solicit, accept, or receive political contributions, cannot be candidates in partisan elections for public office, and cannot solicit or discourage the political activity of anyone who has business before their employing office. So again, these are the ones that apply all the time. There's only one prohibition that does not apply all the time, and that is the prohibition against engaging in political activity while on duty, while wearing a uniform or any kind of official insignia, using a government vehicle, or in a federal workplace. So I want to talk just a little bit about what political activity is for purposes of the Hatch Act, because the Hatch Act has a very specific definition of political activity, and that is activity directed at the success or failure of a political party, a candidate for partisan political office, or a partisan political group. So when we're talking about political activity in the Hatch Act, this is what we're talking about. So just to give you a nice visual, a graphic here, displaying either of these two signs would constitute political activity. You have the sign on the left put out by the Republican Party, calling the Democratic candidates, calling one a socialist, and highlighting the fact that the other is under investigation by the FBI. That's going to be considered activity directed at the failure of these candidates. On the right, it's a sign put out by the Democratic Party, pretty clear, stop the GOP, definitely going to be directed at the failure of the Republican Party. So just to give you an example. But, oh, yes. So the question is making your own sign with the same kind of message. If the message is the same, it's still going to constitute political activity. Now, in terms of a further restricted employee, let me go back for a second. So these two signs you can see on the bottom are being put out by the parties. So a further restricted employee would not be able to even distribute these types of materials in their off-duty time, because this is going to be considered activity in concert with the political parties, which further restricted employees cannot engage in. It's partisan campaigning. But in terms of the political activity on duty prohibition, the definition is broader than just activity in concert with a political party. So even a less restricted employee, if they were to not take these specific materials, but put some kind of message together that has the same point, less restricted employees still would not be able to display that in the workplace, because it would still constitute political activity. Does that answer your question? Okay. That's right, and that's exactly right. So with further restricted employees, they can't take an active part in campaigning, which means you can't engage in activity in concert with a party or a campaign or what have you. But that is true. Further restricted employees can make their own materials that state their opinion about a candidate, print off those materials and distribute them. They still can't do it at work, because it's still going to constitute political activity. It's not going to constitute taking an active part in partisan campaigning, because they're not doing it in concert with the party. So in terms of political activity, even if these were homemade, it's still going to be political activity, and it would still be prohibited in the workplace, but it would not be partisan campaigning. Does that distinction help? But they could do it outside. On the further restricted employees, on their own time, not at work. Correct. And a less restricted employee could take these two signs and off-duty away from the workplace, distribute them as well. That wouldn't be a problem. It's the definition of political activity, and it ties to the on-duty prohibition, that this would meet that definition, but it would not be partisan campaigning if it's not done in concert with the party. Yes? So that's a good question. So bumper stickers, and that comes up a lot when we're doing these types of presentations. So if you have a partisan political bumper sticker, such as one of these on your personal vehicle, you can still park that vehicle in a government lot or building. What we advise is basically you can't make your car a campaign mobile. One bumper sticker, two bumper stickers, fine, but plastering the whole car. Someone gave me this example the other day where an employee would drive to work, and once the employee had parked in the federal lot, take a big window sign and put it in the front windshield that was a campaign sign. That we would advise against. That's now making the car a campaign mobile. But in terms of having a bumper sticker or two, that's going to be fine, even if it's in a government lot. Yes? Right. So the question is the distinction between something that's being put out by the party or the campaign and something that you create yourself. The distinction really only matters for further restricted employees. And the distinction is that the further restricted employees, they cannot engage in any political activity that's done in concert with the party or the campaign. So for them to get these materials, either whether it's from campaign headquarters or whether it's sharing it on social media, if they're actually getting the materials from the partisan campaign, from the political party, now they're acting in concert with that entity, and that's going to be prohibited for the further restricted employees, regardless of whether they're at work or not. But if it's a further restricted employee making their own materials and expressing their opinion on their own, not in concert with the party, that's when, off duty and away from the workplace, it would be okay for them to, post something like that on social media or, go door to door distributing their own materials that they've made. Does that answer your question? So when we start talking about political activity on duty, we're gonna get into the social media. So let's start talking about it, and then if you still have questions, then definitely let's talk about it then. Was there another question? Yes.
Does it matter for the less restrictive positions if you identify yourself as a government employee in your Facebook? I work at Department of Energy, and then post some of these things that might be okay and not identified as a government employee?
It does not, and in fact, I have a specific slide about that. So if you can hang tight for just a little bit when we get to the use of official authority prohibition, we're going to definitely talk about that in more detail. So the question is in terms of using your title on your social media account and whether that's prohibited. So we're going to get to that. Okay. So we just talked a lot about political activity and what is political activity, but it's also important to note what's not political activity for purposes of the Hatch Act. And that would be anything that is kind of a nonpartisan issue-oriented activity, whether it's advocating for or against pending legislation, ballot initiatives, talking about the budget, or even advocating for or against issues. And some of these are hot-button issues that may be very divided along party lines. It's still going to not constitute political activity if the message is about, for example, gun control or right to life, pro-choice. If the message is purely about those issues, it's not going to constitute political activity. Except that, we do see in the office some of these hot-button issue-oriented messages also tied to activity that would be considered political activity. So for example, you receive an email at work that's talking about gun control and why it's so important for our country or not. That email in and of itself, sending that on would not constitute political activity. But if the email ends by saying, therefore, that's why we need to support candidates from X party, this fall, now that's taking an issue-oriented message and tying it with partisan messaging as well, which would make then the whole message political activity. So that's the one caveat with respect to kind of these issue-oriented messages. Just need to make sure that there isn't also a partisan message tied to it as well. Yes?
What about just like an implicit sort of tieback? Because for gun control and the Affordable Care Act, there's very few issues that are politicized with those two. So I guess it has to be explicit. Is that sort of the tie to political parties?
Well, I guess it depends on what the message is. If there is a clear message that is directed against or for a party or a candidate, even if it's implicit, if it's pretty obvious what the message is, then we probably would say it's political activity. But again, even these issues, yes, these issues are very politically divided. They're very hot button. If the message is only about the issue, then it's not going to constitute political activity. So I'd kind of have to see an example to know what you're talking about. But if it's implicit and it's clear, then I would still say employees shouldn't be sending it at work. So a couple other things to mention before we move on to the prohibitions. In terms of partisan political groups, there are two types of groups that I just want to mention today. One are political action committees, PACs. These groups are definitely going to be considered partisan political groups for purposes of the Hatch Act because they are formed to raise money to give to candidates. And they may give money to candidates on both sides of the aisle. For purposes of the Hatch Act, it doesn't matter. So PACs are partisan political groups. The other type of group that we get a lot of questions about are the 501c4s. And these are these social welfare organizations organized under the IRS code as 501c4s. They are not presumptively partisan political groups, but because they are social welfare organizations under the IRS code. However, they can engage in political activity as long as it is not the majority of what their organization does. And so because of that, employees just need to be careful with what activity they want to engage in with respect to the 501c4. For example, if they receive an email from one of these groups, again, the group is not presumptively a partisan political group, but the message could be about, an upcoming Meet the Candidate event, for a candidate that supports this group's issue. That Meet the Candidate event is still going to be considered, sending that email is going to be considered political activity, even though the group's not a partisan political group because it's an event to meet the candidate. So employees just need to be careful with the 501c4s. Yes? Of a 501c4? I think, oh gosh, I should have one on the top of my head. I think some of the groups like the MoveOn.org group, they tend to have two components. They have a kind of the social welfare component of it, which would not be considered the partisan political group, and then they also have the PAC component that would. So it's groups like that, and there's a lot of them out right now, and they tend to engage in a lot of political activity. It's just that it can't be more than 50% of per the code. Was there another question? Yes. Sure. So the question is, can employees go to a PAC event, right? A PAC, like event being put on by a PAC. Certainly, even a further restricted employee could go. Similar to any other kind of campaign event or party fundraiser, employees can go to a PAC event and listen and hear what the individuals there have to say. That's perfectly fine, as long as they're not on duty. Yes. Sure. Well, so the question is, you go to one of these events and the campaign or the PAC or whatever wants to put a name tag together that has your name and the agency where you work. You know, my best advice would be if the employee knows ahead of time that that's what they want to do with their agency information, I would probably advise the employee to tell the group to please not include that on the badge. But you know, after the fact, if the employee has no idea that that's what they're going to do with it and they show up and they have this name tag to wear, it would be hard for us to say that that employee has now violated the Hatch Act. But yes, I think best practice would be to ask the organization not to include that on any identifying material.
And that goes along too, because often when they're making their donations, they're filling out a lot of information forms because the campaign party wants to know everything that they can about the donor. And they're entering information, where I work, what do I do, and that's just probably going to be a database. They not answer those questions.
No, that's different. So the question here is when you make a contribution, those contribution forms ask for a lot of information, including your employment. And I think that's actually a requirement under the FEC rules, is that they have to do that. So in that case, if employee is filling that out, that's not going to be a Hatch Act violation. That's information that's required to make the contribution. If the employee is concerned, they could always just put federal government as their employer and make it very neutral. But no, we would not conclude that that's a Hatch Act violation. Yes?
I've asked the same question several times recently, and these are further restricted employees, so I don't think it makes a difference. But we have a number of employees whose spouses have positions in campaigns or work in the campaign, and there are events where spouses and sometimes families are expected to attend. And
So the question is, so this is going to be for further restricted employees who has a spouse or close family member who is working on a campaign. It's a campaign event where the campaign, I guess, volunteers or workers are expected to bring family with them. So it's not a Hatch Act violation for a further restricted employee to attend a campaign event. So if they're simply attending the events like anyone else, that's going to be fine for a further restricted employee. There are a couple examples in the regs for further restricted employees who are married to who are married to individuals who are running for office, and there are a couple carve-outs there in terms of having that family relationship. The further restricted employee could, sit at the head table with the candidate, or stand in a receiving line, or be in a family photo that may otherwise, that may appear on like a campaign website. Those activities would otherwise be prohibited for further restricted employees, but if the candidate is a close family member, those are kind of the carve-outs for that. I think a little bit different if the family member is just a campaign worker, but again, it wouldn't be a problem for them to attend the campaign event. That would be fine. Okay. So the first prohibition I want to talk about is the prohibition against engaging in political activity while on duty or in the workplace, wearing uniform or insignia, or using a government vehicle. And this is where, especially this time of year, this is where we tend to see most of the complaints coming into our office. It tends to be about this prohibition. We're already starting to see things now. We've received a couple complaints. One was an employee at an agency town hall meeting held in the workplace. The employee got up, started talking about corruption in government, and then told everyone they needed to vote for Bernie Sanders. We have another complaint about an employee who was dealing with a customer and started chanting Trump, Trump, Trump while they were serving the customer. So again, these are just complaints we haven't investigated yet, but just kind of the things that we're starting to see in our office. On the email front, we've seen, we've seen anti-Hillary emails, we've seen anti-GOP emails. So we're starting to see the uptick in complaints, and it's that time of year. So a couple things worth mentioning about this prohibition. In terms of on duty, you all probably know this already, but even when an employee is telecommuting, if they're in a duty status during that telecommuting time, they're subject to this prohibition and therefore can't be, firing off political emails left and right. Same thing with union officials. If an employee is given official time to perform union duties, they are still considered on duty during that time, and so they would not be able to engage in political activity while they're on that official union time. The one question that comes up sometimes with respect to telecommuting is about employees who have campaign signs in their yard or in their front window. Employees want to know if while they're telecommuting, they need to take that sign down. And the answer is no. Even though employees telecommuting, their home does not become a federal room or building, so they do not have to take the sign down. But they just can't otherwise engage in political activity. In terms of government rooms or buildings, if it's a wholly owned federal building, all the space within that building is going to be off limits, even cafeterias or lobby areas, even gyms if it's within a wholly owned federal building. Yes? Those are going to be considered federal room or building if it's a situation where GSA is leasing space in a private building. So for example, my office is located in a private building, but we occupy 2 floors, our agency does. Any of the space that the agency occupies, where federal employees are working, that's going to be off limits. But if it's a private building, the lobby of the private building would not be off limits if the employee is not on duty. Yes?
So we have on our federal installation, we have buildings that are occupied by contractors completely. So how does that work? Is it still federal land? Is it still private?
It's a building that's on federal property, but it's contractors only work in the building. Does the federal government still own the building? Well, if only contractors work in the building and there are no federal employees in the building, it might not meet the definition of room or building, because it's room or building where employees are occupying it in the discharge of their official duties. The contractors are not going to be covered by the Hatch Act, so there's not really an issue for them. And probably, any federal employee that happens to go in there, they're probably going to be on duty, so they're going to be prohibited from engaging in political activity anyway. So it's probably not going to be too much of an issue, but if it is, give us a call and we can kind of talk it through and see exactly what's going on. Yes?
What about if an employee is on a break?
Mm-hmm.
And it would be okay for them to use their, limited use of computer equipment?
So that's a good question. So an employee who is on break time,
Could they go into political news, for example?
well, so let me answer that 2 ways. First, just reading political news, even looking at a campaign website online, that's not going to constitute political activity. So under the Hatch Act, even an employee on duty could do that. I mean, your agency may not appreciate you spending your work time that way, but in terms of reading political material, that in and of itself is not political activity. But if an employee is on break, even if it's their lunch break, and so they're not considered on duty during that time, if they're still in the federal building, they're still going to be prohibited from engaging in political activity because it's an or prohibition. It's on duty or in a federal building. So for example, during lunchtime, an employee couldn't start sending emails, encouraging people to vote a certain way if they're still in the federal building at the time. Yes?
What if you're on a break and you go outside, so you're not inside a government room or building, you're not on duty, but you want to use your government-issued BlackBerry to send a message, then what?
So the question is, using your government-issued BlackBerry or iPhone or whatever it is, you're not on duty and you're not in a federal building, can you use that equipment to engage in political activity? So the Hatch Act wouldn't prohibit it. The Hatch Act is specific, it's on duty, it's in a federal room or building. So if you're not either, and your agency doesn't have, some kind of policy against using government equipment for that reason, I think you'd be okay. It definitely would not be a Hatch Act issue. Yes?
Do you have any guidance on when humor constitutes political activity? I was forwarded an email with a cartoon in it about a particular candidate, and the message of the cartoon was that this particular candidate has a narcissistic personality, but there's no mention of the campaign. And the person who forwarded the email was complaining.
Humor is hard. It's one of the harder questions to answer. A lot of humor, and then the question is whether something that's humorous could constitute political activity. The short answer is it could. Some of the cartoons that we've seen over the years have a pretty pointed message. So even though it's done in a humorous way, it's still clearly, directed at the failure most of the time of, a particular candidate. So it could be political activity, if the message is pretty direct. So, and just to give you an example, we just received a complaint involving a federal employee who sent an email with a link to a YouTube video And the YouTube video was a parody of The Grinch Who Stole Christmas. And so it's the song, you know, "You're a mean one, Mr. Grinch," except that it's "You're a mean one, Mr. Trump." And it's a pretty lengthy video, and it's meant to be humorous, but it's also, it's very scathing in terms of Mr. Trump. And it's alleged that this employee sent this link to this YouTube video to not only to employees, but to subordinates as well. And I've watched the video, and again, it's meant to be funny, but I mean, the point is as direct as it can be, and it's definitely going to, you know, it's political activity. So humor can be a pretty effective way of conveying a message. Yes?
I want to go back to teleworking real quick.
Yes.
You mentioned that an individual can have a sign, you know, on their, you know, their personal house or within the house. Now, what if they're using Skype for Business or another video conferencing software, and they're actually in a meeting with other coworkers that are actually on the government property and in a building, and they have a visible sign behind them in the video conference?
That I would recommend again. So the question, and this question's actually come up before. So the question is, okay, federal employee is telecommuting from home. He's having a video teleconferencing meeting with people in his official capacity, and the campaign sign that's in the front yard or the window is visible. Yeah, I would say definitely move locations of that teleconference. Should not have that campaign sign hanging out in the background while you're having that official meeting. Absolutely. That would be bad. Yes. Oh, let me go here first, and then I'll, yes.
What about employees who have pictures on the wall of them with some of the now candidates? A picture was taken, say, no campaign team in the picture.
Right. So I'm going to just move to the next slide, and I'm going to come back to your question. So one of the questions that comes up a lot during this time of year is pictures of president or pictures of candidates in general in the workplace. And the Hatch Act regulations say that you can't display a partisan political picture, and we've interpreted that to include photographs of candidates. So the general rule is if an individual is currently running for office, you cannot have a photo of that individual in the workplace. However, we have kind of two exceptions to that rule. One deals with when the president is running for re-election and the official photograph of the president. We don't have that this election cycle. The other exception deals with what we call personal photographs. So that is a photograph where maybe you or a close loved one, maybe a child or a spouse, is in the photograph with the candidate. And it's taken at some kind of personal event, you know, not a campaign event, but some kind of personal event. If an employee has had that kind of photograph up, it wouldn't be a violation to keep that photograph up now that the individual in the photo has become a candidate. So it would be okay. Does anyone have questions about that? Okay, let me go to your question.
I wanted to go back to spouses. So, you know, we have spouses who help out with campaigns, things like that, and we had a situation where somebody's spouse wanted to host a campaign event at their house. So, for that employee, I mean, can they not, then that can not help out their spouse with that?
So, okay, so it's going to depend on a couple of things. So the question is, non-federal employee spouse wants to host a campaign event in a home that he or she shares with a federal employee. So a couple of things. If we're talking about a less restricted employee, then that less restricted employee himself can also host a campaign event in their home, as long as it's not a fundraiser. So that's where the second part comes in. So if it's just a campaign event, it's just a meet the candidate event, come hear the candidate speak, that's going to be fine for a less restricted employee to host. Not a further restricted employee, but a less restricted employee could do that. If what you're talking about is a fundraiser, and we're going to get to that prohibition in a moment, but if what you're talking about is a fundraiser, no federal employee can host a fundraiser for a candidate or a political party. In the spouse situation, we advise that, you know, the spouse is not covered by the Hatch Act, so the spouse can certainly host the event in the home. And the employee is not prohibited from attending. We do caution to make sure that any kind of invitation to the event makes it clear that it is the non-federal employee spouse that's hosting. We had a situation many years ago where we received a complaint about an employee who had hosted a fundraiser. The employee claimed it was not me, it was my husband, but when you looked at the invitation, it said, please join us in welcoming X candidate at the home of, you know, Bob and Sue Smith. So the wording of the invitation made it suggested that it was both spouses who were hosting the fundraiser and not just the non-federal employee spouse. So you just need to be careful. But the federal employee can attend the event. We would advise the employee against, for example, like introducing the guest speaker or otherwise engaging in activities that a host would typically engage in. But attending is certainly fine. Does that answer? Okay. So with going back to political activity on duty, clearly wearing anything in the workplace that shows support for or against a candidate is going to be prohibited. We've gotten questions about employees wanting to wear the "Make America Great Again" hat. It's a presidential campaign slogan, definitely not in the workplace. We've talked about candidate photographs, but even we've had questions about screensavers, that pop up and show a campaign logo. That's going to be prohibited, or anything else in the workplace that shows support or opposition. Oh, and then the last bullet point there, making online donations. That's one of the purest forms of political activity. Employees aren't prohibited from donating money, but you just can't do it while you're at work. That would be considered a violation of this prohibition. The more interesting area with respect to this prohibition, though, deals with the emailing and the blogging and the social media use, and that's where we tend to get more questions and where we see more activities. In terms of email, social media, it's not, as we mentioned earlier, it's not the government device that's the issue. It's not even the government email account that's the issue. I think some employees still think that as long as they don't use that .gov email account, they use their Gmail account or what have you, they're free to send whatever they want at work. It's important to emphasize it's the on-duty or in the federal building. We've seen cases with employees who have sent emails from their Gmail account that are political activity. Employee hasn't even sent them to other federal employees, but we still get complaints about it. So employees just need to be really careful if the message of the email is directed at the success or failure of a candidate or party or a group. They can't be sending it or even forwarding on at work. Yes?
Is it in the law or regulations that it is in the workplace prohibition? Because it makes more sense that it would be government.
It's this, right, it's the statute itself that lays out that it's on duty in the federal room or building. It's, yeah, it has not been changed to be more encompassing at this point. So one other thing with respect to email that's worth, did you have a question in the back? Sure.
On that note, is that in the work that you consider?
Well, it's something that Congress would have to do. It's been discussed at times, but to my knowledge, there's nothing in the works. When the Hatch Act was last amended back in 2012, the only change Congress made with respect to federal employees was the penalty provision. They didn't mess at all with the rest of the prohibitions, so for what it's worth, yeah. So email, the email does not have to come from a campaign. It does not have to say vote for it still to constitute political activity. Most of what we see in the office, the emails that I've talked about earlier in terms of anti-Hillary, anti-GOP, these are not emails that are coming from campaigns. It's who knows where they're coming from, but the message is definitely directed at their failure. So employees just need to be aware that even if it's an email they receive, it's not coming from a campaign. If the message is clear, they can't be forwarding that email on, or writing their own email for that matter and sending it to people, encouraging them to vote a certain way. And the other thing to remind employees about is that it doesn't matter if you send it to other federal employees or not in terms of the violation, but the Merit Systems Protection Board, who adjudicates Hatch Act cases, they have found that sending it to other federal employees in the workplace is an aggravating factor in terms of upping the penalty that an employee would receive for engaging in political activity on duty. So it's important to remember. With respect to union email can constitute political activity, and this is kind of the time of year where we start getting complaints about unions engaging in political activity in the workplace. If the union email is about a candidate or a party, it could meet the definition of political activity. We had a case many years ago where an employee had sent an invitation in the workplace to a union event. but the union event was a Meet the Candidate event. It was an individual who was running for U.S. representative. So even though the event was being put on by the union official sent it to all union employees, it was still about a Meeting the Candidate event, and so it constituted political activity. That case we litigated with the board, and the employee received a 60-day suspension for sending that. So employees who are members of unions, or especially those who are union officials, I know the unions also give a lot of information about the Hatch Act, but it's always important to emphasize that if it's political activity, even if it's union activity, it can't happen in the workplace. Yes? I would still say that that would constitute political activity. Even if it's a come meet all the candidates, it's still an opportunity to hear the candidates, speak, give their stump speech or what have you. So even if it's all of them, I would say that employees should not be emailing that type of invitation, in the workplace. Okay, so with respect to social media, basically the same thing applies. If the message of the social media post meets the definition of political activity, federal employees can't be posting those messages while they're on duty or in the workplace, sharing those messages if it's someone else who's posting them, tweeting those messages on Twitter, or retweeting them. And that's true whether, again, they're using their personal iPhone and just kind of sitting at their desk doing it. If they're on duty or in the workplace and that message meets the definition of political activity, it can't be happening it would be a Hatch Act violation. Do you want to talk more about social media in the back?
Yeah, I mean, there's posting it to your Facebook page, and then there's liking it, almost all the social media platforms have something similar to the like button, where you may not necessarily be posting it, but you are doing that.
Right. And so the question is about liking posts on Facebook. We've advised that if what you're liking, if the message is political activity, to not do it at work. There's some case law out there that, says that liking is an expression of opinion. It's showing support. So you just need to wait till you get home to do it. You can't do it while you're at work. So further restricted employees, that is a change that we have made in the advice that we're giving with respect to social media. And we, for those of you who are unfamiliar, we reissued some social media guidance in the fall. It's on our website. It's fairly comprehensive. Prior to then, we used to advise further restricted employees that they could not like partisan political posts because it would, further disseminate it onto their Facebook friends and followers and what have you. We kind of reconsidered that advice in terms of further restricted employees. And for further restricted employees, we now advise it's okay, again, as long as you're not at work, but it is okay for a further restricted employee to like a post, even if the post is from a campaign or a political party. They still can't share the post because sharing it is, sharing it, just further disseminating it, and further restricted employees can't circulate campaign literature. So sharing it's still a problem, but simply liking it is not going to be a problem for further restricted employees. Well, it again goes to the distinction between political activity, which you can't engage in while on duty, and taking an active part in partisan political campaigning, which is only applicable to the further restricted employees. So we're concluding it's political activity, you're showing support, but it's not taking an active part in campaigning to like. Yes? Okay.
There's the permutation where in the abstract the career SES likes, and that's defined for review advice. The situation I've been concerned about is when the career SES has several people who report to them as friends on LinkedIn, and they like. Is that okay, or does that begin to bring in separate problems under use of official authority?
Okay, so the question is the idea of a supervisor who is friends or what have you with subordinate employees, and that supervisor engages in political activity on the social media platform. The subordinate employees are seeing that and being subject to it because they're friends. Let me take it away from LinkedIn for a minute, because LinkedIn is something we've been talking about in the office as possibly a little bit different. So I'm going to take it out of LinkedIn. But in terms of Facebook or Twitter, we've advised that that's not a Hatch Act violation. As long as the subordinate is, or as long as the supervisor is not targeting the message to the subordinate employees, that merely being friends with subordinates and then engaging in political activity on that social media account, that's not going to be considered a use of official authority. The reason I take LinkedIn out, LinkedIn is a little more problematic for us because at least our understanding of LinkedIn is that people tend to join that as kind of a official kind of networking type social media site as opposed to Facebook. And so if people have LinkedIn accounts kind of in their official capacity, there could be some problems then with engaging in political activity on that LinkedIn account, especially if they are linked in with people that they work with. So the LinkedIn, I don't have a definitive answer for you because we're still struggling with that a little bit in the office. Does that answer?
It does, but it actually raises a serious concern.
Okay.
I've actually been reluctant. We wrote up a summary of that new advice, and I've been reluctant to actually send it out to the career workforce because I think the reality is most, in terms of social media, SES, if you're talking about people who are more advanced in their career path, then I suspect LinkedIn is the one they're interested in.
Okay.
I'm very concerned that that advice is going to be misread, to allow exactly what I think we agree we should be concerned about.
Sure.
So that is something I strongly suggest that OSC come up with some kind of written supplementary guidance. Because right now we're in the position of, I honestly, I think you've created a situation where, people could do this and then say, oh, defense of law. OSC
Right.
said it. We don't want people in that.
No, and I appreciate that, and I will do just that. In fact, at the end, if anyone is not already a member of our listserv, I'm going to give you that information where you can join. But I will make a note to go back and talk to Anna and then also the people who are above us to see whether we can put some more specific advice together with respect to LinkedIn and any differences that may apply because of LinkedIn having that kind of official connection. So I appreciate that, and we'll definitely do that. I'm writing myself a note right now. Was there another question in the back? Yes.
I think Facebook just recently introduced, instead of just liking, they have all these different now emotions.
Yes.
Do you guys distinguish at all between liking versus all these new emotions that they have?
Yes, so in case of any of you who are not familiar, I think this happened last week maybe, or maybe the week before, and we kind of knew it was coming, but we still just shook our head. It's, they're called emojis, but they have a name for them. It's, what is it? Right, but they have a, it's not liking, it's something, there's a name, I'll think of it. But as you know, you can cry about something or love something or be mad about something. We're still struggling with that in the office as well in terms of what that means with respect to on-duty activity. I think clearly still liking something, loving something, the point of that is still showing support for. Same thing with, maybe a sad face or the anger face might be showing, not support of. It's the one, it's surprise. I think there's, or no, surprise laughing. There's one that's like, ha ha. That's the one that we're kind of scratching our heads about. So that is something else I think we're also going to get some more detailed guidance about. But yes, it's on our radar. It's just Facebook keeps changing things on us, and it makes it really hard for us to continue advising. But yes, that will be something else we can issue via the listserv. Yes.
Again, on social media, so I understand that thinking that you're off duty, at home, posting things to your Facebook page versus a public-facing social media page where anybody on that social media site can see it. What about I get these campaign materials on social media, and then I send that just to my mom and my dad? So we're an email, but through Facebook Messenger or Twitter.
This is a further restricted employee. Yeah, for the further restricted employee, the Hatch Act regs just don't make a distinction in terms of who you're circulating that material to. So if it's coming from the campaign, even sending it to your parents, it's further disseminating that material. For a further restricted employee, I would advise them against doing it. Yes. So in terms of the on-duty, the question is someone who, works a regular workday, but continues working into the hours of the night at home, maybe on the agency BlackBerry or iPhone. So the Hatch Act defines on-duty as in a pay status or when you're representing the government in an official capacity. So a situation like that where an employee is off the clock, I'm assuming even though on call, off the clock, not in a pay status, the fact that the employee may be responding to some emails here and there with respect to work, it may be hard for us to conclude that the employee is on duty at that time if they're not in a pay status just because they are responding to some emails after hours. Does that answer your question? Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I mean, it's a follow-up regarding the same agency that she's raising.
Okay.
But so if they're receiving law enforcement availability pay, they're in effect available 24/7. I don't know if that then
So are they in a pay status then, 24 hours a day?
they're available for 27. They're not necessarily. I mean, they're getting a 25% premium for being available.
Yeah, let's talk afterwards. That might be something that we'll have to look at. I think even if they're getting a pay premium for being available, if they're not currently in a pay status, we have to balance the Hatch Act with the First Amendment as well. And so it would be hard to say employees can't engage in political activity at all, 24 hours a day just because they might get a call and might have to go in.
Yeah, I guess I'm just not clear what you mean by pay status, but I mean, certainly they're not working 24 hours straight.
Right. Yeah, I would say, if it's after hours time and they're not actually getting paid for that time,
Well, they're getting paid for being available, but they're,
okay, yeah, let's talk after line, because offline afterwards, and I can get your information and maybe follow up with you after, because this is something I've not come across before, so we'll talk. Is there, yes?
What about if we let employees go on voting day, election day, to go vote, if admin people will do that, if they're on a pay status, but
That's,
put on their Trump shirts when they go down to the polling place or something like that, is that or not?
well, I don't know that they can wear their Trump shirt when they vote, because there's rules about that, but not Hatch Act rules. But no, and in fact, the question comes up sometimes about individuals wearing their uniform when they go vote, because voting clearly is political activity, because it is. And we've advised employees who wear a uniform to work, they've not now violated the Hatch Act by showing up at the polling place to vote wearing their uniform. I would say same thing. If they're given admin leave to go vote because of their hours and the times of the polls closing, it would not be a Hatch Act violation for them now to go vote while they have that admin leave. Yes.
I understand what you say, the emphasis on the on place of work, but what about if a person, not a supervisor, just an employee, takes the email addresses of their coworkers with them home, and then email them some kind of material that could be considered political?
That's tough. So the question is, an employee who takes all of their coworkers' email addresses, their official email addresses, takes them home with them, and then blast emails them political materials while they're at home. I would definitely advise an employee not to do that. I mean, you could make an argument I don't know if the board would agree. I mean, you could make an argument that it's a use of official authority. They have access to those email addresses because of their official job. Now they're taking them home and using them to blast political messages. So, I mean, you could make that argument, but if an employee asks us if they could do that, I would definitely advise them against doing that. If for no other reason, and they're now making those employees susceptible to violating the Hatch Act themselves, if they get the email at work the next day and they think, oh, this is great, I want more people to know about it, and they send it on, now they'll have violated the Hatch Act. So, okay, I'm going to keep moving right along. Okay. So these are just examples that I'm going to go through very quickly, but just some visuals, the retweeting from Marco Rubio's campaign, the sharing of the Hillary Clinton post. These are both coming from campaigns, can't happen while on duty or in the workplace. I think you guys probably know these logos, they're all presidential candidates, can't be displaying these in the workplace, can't be emailing these at work. We had a question about an employee who wanted to make one of these logos their Facebook profile picture, and whether if they did that, they could still post to Facebook while on duty or in the workplace. And we advise that if you make your Facebook profile picture, a campaign logo or some other kind of partisan political message, then you cannot post to Facebook at all while you're on duty or in the workplace, even if the message is, where you're going to go to lunch that day. Because every time you post on Facebook, that profile picture posts with it. So every time you post, all your friends see that profile picture over and over again. So we concluded that that's political activity to keep displaying that picture over and over again when you post on Facebook. So if you decide to make a Facebook profile pic one of these, then you cannot post at work. Different from the cover photo on Facebook that just remains up there. It doesn't get displayed every time you post something. A cover photo can be one of these and you're fine. It's the profile picture that goes along with every post. Yes? That would be okay. For the same reason that it would be, and the question is, if your Facebook profile picture is a personal photo of you and the candidate, same reason that it's okay to display it in the workplace, it would be okay. It would meet that exception. Okay. These mugs, very quickly, pro-life, pro-America, I love Planned Parenthood, they're issue-oriented, not going to be political activity for purposes of the Hatch Act. These here, what do you all think? I Miss W, Don't Tread on Me, Proud of My Liberal Values, Pro-America, Anti-Obama. Do these constitute political activity if you displayed these at work? The answer is actually no. So I Miss W and the anti-Obama, George W. Bush and Obama, they're not candidates, so that's not going to be activity directed at their success or failure. Proud of My Liberal Values. Being liberal may generally be associated with one party over the other, but liberal is, it's a political philosophy, it's not a political party. So displaying that or wearing that would not constitute political activity. And then same thing with the Don't Tread on Me, the Gadsden flag. It is associated by some with the Tea Party. The Tea Party itself is not a political party for purposes of the Hatch Act. It's again, this kind of political movement, this ideology. There are some PACs associated with the Tea Party that they would be considered political parties, but partisan political groups. But in terms of the Tea Party itself, it's not. And the Gadsden flag as well, it has historical significance, so it would not be considered political activity to display it. Yes? So the question is, what if you have one of these displayed and your supervisor wants you to take it down? I would want to know the supervisor's reasoning, because your agency may still have rules in terms of keeping a neutral workforce, keeping the workplace neutral. So there may be another reason why the supervisor is taking it down other than just suppressing your right to express your opinion. So it would depend. But yes, if the supervisor wants you to take it down just because he doesn't agree with it, and he tells you that, then I'd probably call our office. Yes?
So, the Tea Party in some states is actually a registered party, so does it?
I think as far as I know, the only state that it's the actual state party is Florida. Is that? Okay, so that would be the one difference. In Florida, we would, still the Gadsden flag, I think it would be hard because it does have historical significance. But in Florida, we would say that, activity directed at the success of the Florida State Tea Party would meet the definition of political activity. Yes?
Just a little bit. I just wanted to see if I could find a line. Like one that says, proud of my GOP values.
No, so that's referring, the proud of my GOP values, that's referring specifically to the Republican Party. So that would be showing support for the Republican Party. But proud of my conservative values would not. I mean, yes. Another question over here. Did you have a question? Yes.
So if we see people displaying these, we should, we don't give any advice about it?
Well, in terms of the Hatch Act, again, it's not a Hatch Act violation. So, I mean, if your agency has other rules in place, then that's something that would be outside of our scope. But in terms of the Hatch Act, we would have no ability to, require someone to take this down because it wouldn't be a Hatch Act violation. Does that answer your question?
And if we get a complaint about it, what should we tell the person?
You could always refer them to our office, and we could talk to the person and explain why it's not a Hatch Act violation. Might not make the person happy, but again, that's what I'm talking about in terms of keeping a neutral workforce. A neutral workplace. Your agency may have policies that if there's something that's disruptive to the workplace, it needs to come down. So if you have employees complaining, I mean, I don't know, each agency is different. So there may be something other than the Hatch Act you could rely on to ask an employee to remove it if it's offensive to others. Yes?
Does the source of these types of signs or stickers matter? So the Don't Tread on Me said a illegible script, very kind of body was sold by the Tea Party of Florida, or the proud of my liberal values was purchased on the Democratic website. Does that matter, that source, or is it simply the message?
It could. In the Tea Party example, if you're in Florida and it said on there that, this is, something Tea Party of Florida, then yes, I think now it's about that political party. Same thing with liberal values. If it said, Democrat.org on the bottom, then it's more than just about liberal values. It's also about the party. So it could matter. Yes. Yes.
What about political memorabilia that goes up that was from the Clinton administration, Bill Clinton administration?
Questions about political memorabilia from the Clinton administration. It would depend on what that is. If it just simply says Clinton, I would say take it down. If it says Clinton Gore, it's clear it's from the historical campaign, and it's something that you've had up. I would say, if you start displaying Clinton Gore stuff now and you haven't had it up before and employees start complaining, it's going to look to us like you have a political reason for displaying it. But if it's something that if you're a political buff and you've had this up, since even before Hillary was a candidate, then that would be okay. So it's going to depend. Yes.
Another hypothetical, but I'm trying to figure out whose intention matters. Let's say I put a stuffed elephant on my desk. If somebody complains about the fact that it's a stuffed elephant and it's relevant because that has a political association, does the person's complaint matter, or does my intention matter political?
You all are a tough crowd today. So the question's about a stuffed elephant, and so on an employee's desk. And I'm assuming that this stuffed elephant is just coming up now, like it's a hypothetical. In terms of an employee's intent, the fact that someone is offended by it doesn't automatically make something political activity. Certainly, if the employee's intent is to display that elephant to show support for the Republican Party, then I would tell that employee, just take it home. But an employee's not going to say, that's why I'm displaying my elephant. So it's just hard. I mean, if it's just a regular stuffed elephant that's, something a kid might be carrying around, and it's been up for a while, and there's nothing else in the office that would suggest it's, supporting the Republican Party, it might be hard for us to say that's political activity. But you know, there are some elephants that are clearly the GOP elephant. That I would say don't have in the workplace, even if it's a stuffed animal. Well, I would say it's a combination because, again, if the employee's intent is to show support for the Republican Party, then the employee should not put it up. Clearly, they have a political purpose in showing it, and they should put it down. But again, you're not going to usually get that employee who says, yes, I put it up there. So that's when we would have to take context in to see, you know, is there really a political purpose in displaying this? Yes. I mean, I think we would have to know more about exactly what's going on, because I don't think it's entirely inappropriate for a supervisor to say, hey, you know, I don't know if this is a Hatch Act violation, but it, you know, might give the appearance of one. You need to be careful. You know, the supervisor might be coming from a good place and not just, you know, trying to thrust his own political views on the employee. I mean, I would say if a supervisor is doing that because they don't want to see that kind of display at work, or they don't want their subordinate to support a particular party, then I think we need to have a talk with that supervisor. But merely, you know, suggesting to someone, you know, especially if it's something that's, you know, borderline or in the gray like this, that there could be, employees could raise issues, I don't necessarily see something inherently wrong with that. Yes. There are not. There's nothing in terms of giving the appearance of a violation being an issue. Right. I mean, I think in terms of advising employees, you know, one thing you could always advise them is that, you know, I'm not sure, but this could result in a complaint to the Office of Special Counsel, who's then going to be calling you to investigate whether what you're doing is of a Hatch Act violation. So, I mean, there's not an appearance, you know, component per se, but if it's given the appearance of a Hatch Act violation, another employee sees it, it could result in our office getting involved. Yes. Sure. That is true. There is always the balance in terms of the First Amendment and the Hatch Act, because the Hatch Act is an encroachment on your First Amendment rights. But yes. Right. So if it's a presidential appointee with Senate confirmation, as long as they meet certain criteria, they have to, you know, occupy a position here in the United States, and they have to, their job has to be one where they determine policies to be pursued in the nationwide administration of laws or in the in relationships with foreign entities. So as long as they meet that criteria, then the PAS are not subject to the on-duty or in the federal workplace prohibition as long as their political activity is not funded by the U.S. government. It's the only difference for PAS, though. PAS are subject to all the other prohibitions the same. It's just this one where there's the difference. Yes?
You mentioned, referring to your office, is there any role for IGs in investigating these things? I work for IGs, and every now and then we'll have somebody they've done a full investigation and the report says, oh, and we think there was a hashtag violation. Also, but they'd like to take discipline against without waiting for
Right, so the question is the role of IGs and in terms of investigating Hatch Act violations and then even an agency taking disciplinary action. So you need to be careful there because the issue is that an agency really can't discipline an employee for a Hatch Act violation. I mean, I guess they could, but if an employee appealed it to the board, it's very likely that the employee would win because there is some old case law out there where the board has said it has exclusive jurisdiction to discipline employees for a Hatch Act violation. So there are times when an IG will refer a matter to us where they've investigated a component, have found a Hatch Act violation, and referred the Hatch Act part to us to investigate. We've worked with IG shops before in terms of doing the investigation together. So there could be a role, it just depends on the violation. And it's also, there's many situations where it may be a Hatch Act violation, but also a violation of something else as well. So the IG investigates, the other portion and then still sends the Hatch Act portion to us to do something with. All right, yes? Right, so any other political appointee, whether it's non-career SES or Schedule C or what have you, they are treated just like every other federal employee, just like a general schedule employee. They don't have any special exceptions. So are you talking about a PAS or a political appointee? It would depend. There's only the two categories of employees, the PAS, and then there are certain employees within the EOP that also would. Yeah, then he's considered on duty all the time. Okay. And is he, so he's in a pay status 24 hours a day? Okay, can we talk after, just so I can get some more information, because I'm out of time. Yes, so let's talk after, yes.
Is there information inside some of the list of documents or is it on your website?
The slides here? I don't know about this, whether it's in the summit packet, but I certainly could send out the PowerPoint on our listserv if that is something that you all are interested in. Okay, so one, I have to apologize because I have run out of time and clearly have only talked about one prohibition, so I really do apologize about that. You guys obviously have a lot of questions. Let me just go to the last slide here. I don't think our listserv is on here, but I want to tell you what it is so you have it. Please, I will stick around. I know there's, I think, 15 minutes before the next session. I will stick around if you guys want to come talk to me offline afterwards. Also, please feel free to call us at any time with any questions. In fact, it's only Anna and me now. I'll give you my direct line if you want it. It's 202-254-3673. So please feel free to call me. In terms of the listserv, I will, in fact, let me write myself a note. I will send out this PowerPoint presentation via the listserv. And then if anyone has any questions about the prohibitions that we did not get to discuss today, then you can call me. So to sign up for the listserv, if you're not already a member, so it's listserv, listserv.osc.gov. And we use that to send out, if we issue a new advisory opinion that has broad reaching implications, any up what we're advising, anything that we think will be of interest, we try to send that out via the listserv. So when we do get together some more guidance concerning LinkedIn or I think it's reactions is what it's called on Facebook, the different little emojis now, we'll send that out via the listserv. And then same thing with the PowerPoint, I will send it out via the listserv. Again, I really apologize for running out of time, but you guys have been an awesome group. Oh, yes. Oh, sure. Okay, so it's listserv.osc.gov. So if you just type that into your browser, it will take you to where you can sign up and enter in your email address and everything. Okay, well, thank you all very much. Like I said, I'll stay here if you have any questions.
Welcome back. That was quite a lively session on the Hatch Act. A lot of questions there.
That was a ton of questions, which is one of the reasons why the Hatch Act presentations are some of the more popular ones at any summit that we give, because people do have so many questions. It's a very, very complex law, and the Office of Special Counsel has done a great kindness to us by allowing us to come and vigorously interrogate their speaker.
That's right. Well, luckily we would have Patrick and Cheryl here for the next interview, who will be able to talk about their session coming up. So I guess we'll cut away for now and come back with them.
And so we're back, and I'm very pleased to be joined by Patrick Shepard and Cheryl Kane-Piasecki for a brief interview. So you guys have set up this thing online that's a big resource for ethics officials across the world, right? What is this thing?
Are you referring to our video library, or our library of video tapes?
That's right, yeah.
OGE's Institute for Ethics in Government.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we have on max.gov, we have a repository of distance learning training materials and links to videos that we've done over the past, when did we start, 2013?
I think 2013, May 9th, 2013
May
is
9th,
when
2013.
we launched OGE's
you know,
Institute for Ethics in Government.
To the date, we know
Yeah.
exactly when we started this. Yeah, and we are encouraging agencies to use that for staff development training. We at OGE use it for staff development training. It's nice because we have a course directory you can go through. You can create curricula for yourself and your staff.
Yep.
And we've found it really works well because it's self-paced. So You can take it in small chunks as your staff has time, so it doesn't take a big chunk out of their day. They can do it as time permits.
Yep, and I think the nice thing is you don't have to wait for us.
Right.
You can get started right away. You have a new staff member walks through the door on Monday morning. You can sit them down and get them started learning about the fundamentals of the ethics practice. You can provide them guidance and coaching. And, in addition to the distance learning events, we also use the Max community to make you aware of our in-person training opportunities.
Right.
So we've not stopped doing in-person training. We've just made it more effective and more focused and more responsive to the needs of the community. And I think that's the goal. We do this for you guys.
Right.
The goal isn't to satisfy whatever classes we want to teach.
Or performance evaluations or
right.
something, Yeah.
So to that end, I think you mentioned yesterday that we're going to be sending out a needs assessment soon, so people can let us know, what is it that you need? Where are the gaps? What kind of skills do you find are difficult to develop in your employees? And to the extent we can help you, we're going to try.
Exactly, because we think we have the canon of the fundaments right now. We think our fundamentals series, we've covered pretty much the waterfront, I think, of most of the statutes and the standards. We might have some small holes here and there,
Yep.
but truly, anything that you think you need by way of specific, more niche-y sort of topics to focus on, we're all ears.
Absolutely. I think one of the comments that we often get with respect to the Advanced Practitioner series is this isn't advanced enough. I'd like something more advanced.
Yes.
Well, you let us know what it is, and we'll do our
Right.
best to bring it to you. So
we will
please
dig
look for that
into
opportunity.
the arcane esoterica of the ethics canon.
Absolutely. You want advanced,
Yeah,
we'll give you advanced.
We can dial up Lee Francis for the legislative history of anything you guys want to talk about. So, you let us know. We'll figure it out.
So I wanted to make sure that wanted to give you guys a chance to be able to do a little bit of advertising for the Institute for Ethics in Government, because I am also a user, and one other thing is that all of the self-paced courses that you can do on there's also all of the materials. You can do all of the exercises.
That's right.
And that's a really key thing to be able to do. I'd also like to take a moment. You guys are also teaching a number of sessions here.
Yes.
Could you talk about your sessions?
Sure.
You want to start with the strategic foresight exercise?
Yeah, the session we should be preparing for right
Right
now,
now.
but
But we like being with you.
we like being here. So yeah, in just a minute we're going to do a repeat session of our first strategic foresight exercise, and this is something we're piloting here at the summit, but we want to continue doing in the DC area, and maybe we can find a way to do this as a distance learning event somehow.
yeah.
But the idea is that what we want to do is help ethics officials experience complicated and difficult situations that you might actually find yourself in before the consequences are real.
Right.
So we want to practice how we play, and it's sort of a full speed exercise. We give you a serious challenge, and in many cases we don't know the answer to the challenge.
Right.
But it's realistic, and having thought about it and thought through the possibilities can really be helpful to us as ethics officials to be prepared when things don't always go according to plan.
Exactly, and the exercise we're doing here at the conference is very much, or at the summit, is very much related to the overarching topic of the summit, which is transition. So the exercise we're engaged in here is dealing with how do you deal with transition and onboarding new leadership and taking advantage of opportunities to sell the program and make sure that your program is well received by the new leadership that comes in. But we certainly are envisioning other types of war game type of scenarios
Right.
where we can create like a fictional crisis, if you will, to give you an opportunity to think about how you would play that out if it were actually to occur.
And I
So,
think-
so just to be clear, so you're not talking about just like a really hard ethics question. You're talking about a real life situation that incorporates, maybe there is a hard ethics question that's an aspect of it, but you're dealing with situations that arise from management challenges or dealing with other people that are part of your professional repertoire,
Right.
but are not necessarily the hardcore ethics skills.
Right.
Okay.
As much as we wish we lived in a contained universe of ethics and only ethics, things get messier when others are involved, and others
Right.
are always involved. So we want to think through those things. And I think another benefit that people receive from these workshops and these exercises is you're not alone.
Right.
You have the opportunity to learn from your colleagues, to talk to your colleagues about how they would approach it, to see angles that maybe you wouldn't see by yourself.
Right.
Your desk officer can help you think through some of those things, but that's one more set of eyes. in the workshops, talking about 20 or 30 different perspectives.
Yeah, and in the workshops too, we know that we're going to have people who probably have actually been through some of these drills before, so they can bring the benefit of their experience to the table as well. So it really is a wonderful exercise, I think, for everybody involved, because it gives you an opportunity to be able to think, to be thoughtful about it when the outcome isn't in the balance, you know?
And I think we should probably go teach that class
Yes, I
now.
think we need to go teach that class now.
Okay, so we're going to cut away for just a moment, and then we're going to come back for the main session, government use of social media, opportunities and challenges. For those of you who were watching yesterday, this was the interview that we did with Mr. Christopher Schwartz from OGE. This is his session. So come back in just a few minutes, and we'll watch that together.
Great.
Okay,
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks very much, Ryan.
Thanks for coming.
Okay.
10:30, so might as well get started. Hi, I'm Seth Jaffe. I'm Chief of the Ethics Law and Policy Branch here at OGE. Welcome to our session today on government use of social media, opportunities and challenges. Today, Christopher Swartz and Justin Herman will discuss government use of social media and the opportunities and challenges such use presents for employees as well as ethics officials. Now, before we jump right into this topic, I just want to take a few minutes to talk about and discuss the process that OGE undertook, along with the ethics community, in devising a legal advisory addressing the application of ethics rules to personal use of social media by government employees. OGE is always looking to put more legal advisories on discrete issues. You know what? Someone's talking out there, and I can... So we're always looking for ways to put out legal advisories on discrete issues that will help you do your job on a day-to-day basis. We're addressing issues that you've expressed interest in, as well as addressing issues that are emerging issues in ethics law, such as social media. About 2.5 years ago, we identified employees' use of personal social media as an important and unaddressed area where guidance from OGE would be helpful to the ethics community in doing your job. And after exploring the issues for a few months, back in March 2014, we finally decided that we would go forward with the legal advisory addressing personal use of social media. After several more months of work, we realized that although we could probably adequately address 80–90% of the issues that might come up in this area, we weren't going to be able to address every issue in this advisory. We wanted to make sure that we would address some of the more frequently occurring issues, such as misuse of position, use of time, government property, seeking employment issues, use of title, fundraising issues, as well as personal relationships related to gifts and impartiality concerns. And given the fact that social media is a quickly evolving area, we wanted to reserve an ability to have some flexibility on future guidance in this area, and I'm sure that we'll be doing that also in the future. So, as a result, the social media advisory involved one of OGE's most extensive collaborations with agency ethics officials, because we knew that agency ethics officials were dealing with this issue on a day-to-day basis, and they had a lot of insight, and you all had a lot of insight as to what was going on the ground out there in the ethics community. So, as I mentioned to you in the year in review session yesterday, we held in-person meetings, we had conference calls, we engaged in a series of email exchanges on preliminary drafts of the legal advisory, and basically by interacting with you all and receiving your feedback, we were able to issue what I think is a very well regarded legal advisory, and it's definitely a much better product because of your input. On April 9th, 2015, we issued Legal Advisory 15-3, the standards of conduct as applied to personal social media use. And there are two important themes that run through this legal advisory. First, there's the idea that there's a presumption that when a person is using personal social media, that whatever they say and represent on their personal social media accounts will be perceived to be done in their personal capacity and not in their official capacity. A second theme that runs through the advisory is that although social media is a relatively new way for people to communicate and to interact with one another, the use of social media is still subject to the same ethics rules as other modes of human interaction. I think that the advisory is very adept at singling out these commonalities and applying the same rules to these new communication tools on a conceptual, but as well on a practical level. Today, Christopher Swartz, Assistant Counsel at OGE, will provide a brief background on social media and the important differences between social media and other communication media. Hopefully, by better understanding the distinctions between the types of communications, you'll be better equipped to take a consistent approach when advising in this area. In addition, Chris's presentation will help you to identify the opportunities and challenges in providing appropriate ethics advice when the vast majority of employees are using personal social media. Then Justin Herman from GSA will build on Chris's presentation by specifically identifying and addressing opportunities and challenges arising from official social media use by government employees. Now I'll introduce today's panelists, Christopher Swartz and Justin Herman. Christopher Swartz is an assistant counsel in the Ethics Law and Policy branch at OGE, where he is responsible for developing executive branch-wide ethics policy, interpreting the criminal conflict of interest laws and the standards of conduct, and preparing substantive regulatory guidance and documentation. Chris graduated with a BA in political science from Milan University, and he received his JD magna cum laude. No cum laude here, only magna cum laude, the best for you, from the New England School of Law. Justin Herman manages social media and digital engagement for the General Services Administration's Office of Citizen Services and Innovative Technology, where he leads the social gov community of more than 1,000 managers at over 170 government organizations.
I did not get magna cum laude for anything in my life.
His program is dedicated to helping modernize public service to improve how government works together with citizens, collaborates across agencies, and performs within their own organizations. Justin serves on the White House Open Government Tiger team, developing the third U.S. National Action Plan for Open Government as a commitment to the International Open Government Program of 64 nations. Although I've been told that Justin did not graduate magna cum laude, among other honors, Justin has been recognized as one of the 15 most forward-thinking people in the government by Fierce Government.
All right, thank you, Seth. So in case you didn't pick up from the introduction, I'm Chris. So I want to thank everybody for coming here and being at this presentation. I know this is a hot topic. It's a novel area. There are a lot of unresolved questions, and we are working through them, and I want to second Seth's statement that we thank you a lot for being there and providing your background to us, because it's been a very iterative process in producing guidance in this area. I also want to thank Justin, because Justin's going to highlight some really great opportunities and some really great tools. And so I want to thank you for being here with us. We are going to talk about this standards of conduct. I know that we have to by law. But I'm going to hold those off for a little bit so that we can talk a little bit about social media characteristics, the background of social media and what social media is. And I'm going to do that because I think it highlights the opportunities and some of the challenges that we have with social media that arise out of it because of what the technology is. And hopefully that will give you the ability to orient towards the technology in a way that will make it a little bit easier for you to understand how OG ended up in some of the places we did with our policies. So the first question is, what is social media? Does anybody here not know what social media is? Okay, so 10 years ago, that would have been a very different response. And I think that's a really important thing for us to keep in mind. Now, social media, many of us know it by the platforms and the names of the platforms. And I actually wanted to reiterate that just because we're naming some platforms, we're talking about some products, it's not endorsement of those products. But social media is really an umbrella term that talks about internet sites that allow for quick responsive interaction between people in a social sense, which is different than what we saw with Web 1.0 and Web 2.0, which were much more static, more about sticking information out on the internet, but not providing the responsive capabilities to have a real social interaction, and a little bit different than some of the commercial applications that we've seen in the past as well. Why do you care about social media? Well, the reason why you should care about social media is, one, there are some opportunities and some challenges to using it as a tool. More importantly, social media is a change in technology, and technologies really have the ability of changing the culture of a generation. They have the way of changing the psychological way that we view the world, what we view as important, how we talk to each other about things. And that's becoming more and more important as people of a younger generation who grew up with social media are coming into the government. They think about the world slightly differently, they view the world slightly differently, and that leads to different needs and concerns which can pose different ethics challenges that we haven't focused on in the past because we didn't have the technology changing the culture. In one regard, I want to just point out subpart G, that deals with misuse of position and use of official title. Before the internet, I don't think that this was an area that was something that was a big practice area that came up a lot for ethics officials. Now, I don't know because I wasn't here, so you'll have to tell me if that's wrong. But I think the internet has really exacerbated that because of the way that it allows you to identify yourself. And so we're getting more and more questions in that area. The second reason is because social media use is rising. These are statistics from the Pew Research Center. They're pretty recent. And you can see on the left side, 5 years ago, not a lot of people were using social media. Today, I don't think it surprises anybody that 90% of adults 18 to 29 are using social media. It may be surprising that 51% of adults 50 through 64 are using social media. So that's a large percentage of the people that make up our working class that are using social media now. And they're not using it infrequently. 70% of Facebook users use it daily, and about half, a little bit less, self-report, I don't know, that they use it multiple times per day. Has anybody actually checked their Facebook while they were in the room right now? No? You guys are great, by the way. And I appreciate the attention. But as we go on, you may. So let's talk about some of the important characteristics of social media technology. First, it's communicative in nature. It's easy to generate content. It's easy to share and reshare content. Really, that's the basis of social media. It's high speed, it's widely accessible, it's actually globally accessible. And if you have a mobile phone, you can pretty much get to it anywhere except for maybe the moon. It's low resource and low cost, which means you don't have to have a technician or an expert in the field doing it. It's not like television where you need to have somebody who knows how to operate a camera. It's very easy. Anybody can use social media. It's multimedia. It's long data retention. It's permanent in some cases. I think the Library of Congress keeps all the tweets, and that may be forever. So, and it's informal and conversational. So it is unlike other types of media. It's really very conversational. And the reason I point these out is because these are the implicit characteristics of social media that create all of the opportunities for us, but they also create all of the challenges because this is really just what social media is. So I want to just take a couple of seconds to indicate how social media is a little bit different. One, I have on this screen 3 buckets. One's traditional written communications. This would be like a letter or a book or a report to Congress. On the other side, I have traditional verbal communications. This is you're sitting in a room having a conversation with somebody, you're on the telephone. And you'll see that there are very different characteristics of those two. Social media is interesting because it shares characteristics with both of those. And that creates some real opportunities. For example, it's permanent or semi-permanent, and it can reach a lot of people in the same way that a book or a report could. But it's also informal and a little bit less rigid than the organization that we have to go into when we're writing, let's say, a brief. And that gives us the ability to quickly create content that can be shared and reshared. But it also, there are some concerns here. If it's long-standing information that's out there and we approach it with a more informal viewpoint, and we're not thinking about the fact that we're going to reach a lot of people, we may not think through exactly what we're saying. And I know, no one's ever had that problem with social media, but it's there. So now I'm going to skip through these 2 slides, and I'm just going to make one point here. And the point here really goes towards expectations. What do we expect when we come to making a communication? And really, how do we ensure that the expectations that we have about that communication aren't different from reality? So here, the point that I want to make is that I think a lot of us have grown up with an etiquette, and that etiquette kind of comes out of having conversations in real space. So often if we're talking with a number of people, we expect that our intended audience are going to be responsive to us. They're going to ask for context clues. They're going to say, I don't understand that. Can you repeat that? And if we're in public, that if we're talking to somebody, one, we're going to take some steps to limit saying embarrassing things. And two, that bystanders are going to not try and eavesdrop on us, take the information that they happen to hear in passing, and then go and tell other people, right? I think that etiquette doesn't really work in the social media sphere. Social media really is based off the idea that you're gonna take information from strangers and share it and like it and reshare it and send it out. And so that etiquette, that concept, sometimes that we think, oh, this is gonna be private, only my intended audience is gonna reach it, or approaching it thinking, oh, well, only this sector of the industry cares about this, so they're the only people that are gonna hear this, is not something that's true. You have to think about really how the social media technology works and align your expectations with it. And that's something that you can do through training when it comes to personal social media. And we'll talk about that a little later. And finally, the last thing I want to talk about is social media identity. It used to be before the internet, before telework, before Blackberries, that you could wake up in the morning, go to work, put on your official duty status hat, at the end of the day, take off your official duty status hat and put on your personal status hat. And there was more of a distinction between where you were sitting and your official and your personal capacity. That really isn't the case anymore. I think the fact of the matter is telework, Blackberries, social media, they lead to an integration of identity. The mobile culture that we're in really pushes people to present themselves as an integrated self. And that has some great opportunities, but it also creates some challenges. We see some blurring of official and personal in a way that is new for us, that can create some concerns about, is this being attributed correctly? And that's something that we try to address in our legal advisory, but it's a constant challenge in thinking about this issue. I'm going to skip this slide, actually, and I'm just going to hand it over to Justin because I'm really excited to hear about some of the great things that GSA is doing.
All right, thank you. Actually, just riffing off what you were presenting just there, I remember some years ago, we were made aware there was an official government account that had accidentally tweeted a link to a campaign site, which, of course, as we know, the Hatch Act, you don't do that. Person's response was, oh my goodness, I'm sorry, I meant to put that through my personal phone. I was on my personal phone using my personal account. I'm like, it's still during business hours. You're not helping yourself in any way here. But it just goes to show the challenges that are being faced in guidance, keeping up with the emerging of technology and the availability of these programs can cause confusion where people are not in any way willfully breaking rules or being unethical, but by being ignorant of what those best standards are, they in the course could possibly do so. Which is why today I'd like to talk a little bit about the work that we do in the interagency communities in government around social media to build upon what Chris was talking about, and give a couple of examples of new things that are coming out that both provide opportunity and greater ways, even for you to be able to have a positive effect and get information in the hands of your colleagues who are at the front lines of using emerging technologies to engage with citizens. I will tell you, and I'm sure you know, many of my colleagues, their worst nightmare is running afoul of the people in this room. So today I come into the lion's den to share with you this, and also to see maybe you could identify some things that we're talking about of ways that you can get involved and bring back to your own offices. So once again, when we talk about the scope of things, how many social media accounts do you think we're talking about that are available just within the United States to government agencies? You kind of raised your hand right there. What are you thinking? Roughly, yeah. That's actually pretty close. So a lot of people, they hear the word social media and they're like, Twitter and Facebook. Reality is that what happens is we negotiate terms of service agreements with almost 90 different platforms. This includes Google, Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr. There's already talks agencies using Snapchat and Periscope and all sorts of different platforms. And we're not just talking about sending out posts and links to blog posts and things like that. We're talking about GitHub, which is, sharing open source code. So it breaks down to, it's not even just we're talking about marketing and communications, is that increasingly that social media and collaborative technologies are the bedrock of collaborative public services themselves. And so you can ask somebody, you use social media at work? And they go, no, I don't. And then they'll turn around and use Slack in order to do interagency collaboration and limit the use of email within their program. So it's kind of like what you said, even with surveys, people self-select on how they're doing it. But whether people are knowledgeable about this or not, everything that we're talking about is affecting not just how they engage with citizens, but how they conduct business within the workplace itself. So once again, so we have 88 agreements right now, or possibly more, because we have attorneys working on this at all the times, available. So there's quite a large swath and many different mission areas and purposes for those apps. Now, so what we have is, because as we know, it's been very difficult to stay ahead of emerging trends, the technologies, and to keep up with that, not only keep up with it, but to share that information and make sure that the managers who are responsible for it have the best information when they need it. So we created an interagency collaborative group called the Social Gov Community, which now it went from, in 3 years, 100 people to now about 1,200 managers, and we grow every day. And this is, once again, this isn't just communications and marketing and public affairs shops. These are data scientists, these are attorneys, these are ethics officials. This is anybody who has skin in this game and wants to be knowledgeable and responsible for using these technologies for building the framework of modern public services. But of course, when we talk about personas and official and unofficial and personal use, one of the things that often the public forgets when they look, because when they see social media accounts in government, they see the seal, the great imposing seals that cover each of our agencies. So I like to warm things up a little bit and show you the smiling, warm faces of people who manage accounts across government. And obviously, when you look, these are people excited. They want to connect. You've got NASA and spacesuits over here, federal aviation. People who are passionate about using identities and being part of those communities, and those communities being their customers, being citizens. Thinking at all times, how can we connect in how they want us to connect with them, not just how we want to do it at an agency. But as you can imagine, what is it, Shakespeare, who said that the course of true love never did run smooth. And there could be all sorts of challenges associated with that. So some of the recommendations that we deal with, once again, so in no way I can't go to agencies and tell them you have to do X, Y, and Z. So we provide recommendations based on the best practices that we identify around agencies. Some of the things that we cover, and 3 big areas is, 1, how do we make this more effective? So we're everything from covering performance management, responsible data analysis, things like that. 2 is, how do you make it more transparent? That's when we get into, is it archivable? Is there records in there? Is your policies on ethics around social media readily available and obvious to not only the public, but to customers, not customers, but the government agencies themselves responsible for it? And the third thing, and this is often one of the greatest challenges we face, is how to make it more accessible. In reality, a lot of these programs that we use, the third-party apps, were not built with firm accessibility in mind. And so, but we in public service, as you know, have a higher standard, and it's not just because of the Americans with Disabilities Act, it's that because when there's an emergency going on, for instance, the very people who need that emergency information the most, perhaps are some that Twitter, Facebook is not accessible for. Persons with disabilities, the aging population, citizens in low bandwidth areas that might not have access to Wi-Fi and other connectabilities. These are the things that we have to worry about while we're embracing these emerging technologies. So it's not just even a policy side of it. There's a bureaucracy of technology itself that we must contend with. So some of the laws, when we talk about too, that we have to adhere to, is that there's guidance from OMB, of course, on third-party website applications, but oftentimes what you see from policy standpoint traditionally, which is why we were so excited when when the OGE started covering this more, is because it'll say websites. And there's a policy on websites, and then there's some subsection of a subsection that covers social media, or it just says third-party applications. It's always an afterthought. But the reality of it is that many citizens, whether they even realize it or not, they're not just going to websites and .gov and .mil sites to be able to engage with government. They're choosing and naturally going to social media because often social media is able to find them. They just have to say, I want this information, and no matter what platform or what agency, it can go to them. And yet our policies traditionally have not met that emerging challenge. Then of course there's a Federal Records Act. I mean, let's look at the fact of programs like Snapchat and Periscope, and people are saying, well, it's ephemeral. These things come and go as you please, and it doesn't leave an archive. Well, that's why we haven't exactly embraced it so much yet, because we have a responsibility legally and ethically to be able to archive this, to be able to provide records of it, and what are records in social media itself. So there's all sorts of questions around that. And then, of course, we get into the Freedom of Information Act. I was FOIA'd last year, had to hand over all documents regarding social gov. We tell people, and like you were saying before, is what's public, what's private. If it's typed through a government laptop and it's about business hours stuff, I mean, we just always make the assumption that everything that we do, if it's not public now, it should be public eventually. And so we always try to remind the community that whether it's a DM on Twitter, which some agencies, they actually don't even allow using private messaging on these sites.
That's direct message, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
direct message. But once again, so people sometimes will think, okay, well, I'm just sending this through my Facebook chat at work or something like that. We have all these great new options on how to conduct business, how to engage with citizens. And there's, like I said, more opportunities, but also more challenges to get in trouble with it. So when we're talking about, let's talk about the need itself of social media. This isn't just sending out tweets about blog posts and stuff. In fact, if you talk to companies who manage this, the single largest growth area for social media and public services is customer service and customer experience, making transactions, not just telling the story of what our agencies are doing, but it becomes the story itself of how citizens are engaging. So, for instance, federal student aid, they started using a Twitter hashtag, having a group where they, start answering questions of people for if they want federal student aid so they don't have to go through the phone or email. So less money for the government agency, and now they can answer over 100 questions an hour, and they could do so in multiple languages if that's a particular day for it. It's providing a stunning level of better transactional service for an agency, doing so at less a cost than they would have spent. I don't know, I remember days when I used to call agencies up and have to actually wait on hold for a half hour. And these were, of course, I had to explain this to a high school recently because they couldn't imagine that day. And I was like, the phones used to also have winding cords. And if you're in the country like me, you had to sit in a chair in a cold kitchen for like a half hour on wait just to be told to call back tomorrow. So once again, we're revolutionizing quickly what our expectations are and what people expect from government. But once again, and I say this over and over, with greater responsibility, with greater power comes greater responsibility.
Yeah.
The other thing is, if you're going with Biggie, is more money, more problem. So whether you're a Spider-Man fan or a hip-hop fan, believe me, it runs true, the advice we could give on that.
Does your agency have more money now?
No. But that's because what we figure with social gov, our main goal that we get people to say is that by using digital engagement and these social technologies and third-party apps, you can do two things. One, measurably improve the citizen service. That's when we talk about better transactions, better customer experience, better access to information during emergencies, better veterans being able to access public health information better. The other is reduced costs. Seems like two different things, but a lot of times, if we're doing it right within our agencies, you can do both things at once, such as like we see with student aid. So improve services, reduce costs, put them together, you've had a great day that day. But as you can see behind me, it's not just all the benefits here, because managing and being accountable of all these programs is increasingly difficult, not just because of the decisions that we make, but the decisions that other people want to make for us. This behind me was the CENTCOM's official account about a year ago. When it was taken over, the account was compromised, and somebody graffitied the heck out of it, and not only put up, obviously with pro-ISIS material, but the tweet that got cut off was a sheet with the personal information and addresses of family members of deployed military staff. At the time, we said, although it's graffiti, when there's problems on social media, it's graffitiing a wall, which I think is obscene. Because the idea is not just how scary this is and that this does affect people's lives, but the idea is that we don't have accountability over these programs. It's not what they graffiti that's the problem. It's what about the stuff that they might have access to that they haven't, and it's waiting for key moments in order to make actual damaging impact. We take this responsibility incredibly seriously. In a way, it's almost like the Cassandra complex, because a lot of people that work with you, and probably you're in the same boat, is you can see the train wrecks coming. You can see the risks, but then sometimes people go, well, that's just social media. My 13-year-old does that, so this isn't that big of a deal. But as we can see, this impacts lives. And in fact, because of that ignorance, at that level of people accepting the impact of this, we have to be that much more vigilant, and we have to be that much more supportive of everyone in order to make sure that we're covering our bases. So there's this one particular tool I like to talk about briefly, and one of the ways in which we're tackling this head on is that, so you go online, it's not just accountability over our programs, it's that citizen goes to a .gov.mil account. They know it's a .gov.mil account. It's an official government account because of the prefixes. But as we discussed, we have legal negotiations and accessibility to apps over 80 different platforms. That if you look at the metrics, this is increasingly how citizens choose to engage with public services. However, you go and the Kardashian sisters are verified on Twitter, but some of FEMA's accounts are not, for example. Now, those accounts, if there's a disaster, are certainly important for me to know whether that's information is legitimate or not. You look at this, and there's many examples of companies, organizations, malicious entities that will take over different accounts, pretend to be the government, try to engage with citizens so you can take away their personal identifiable information, so you can cause mischief. There's a myriad of both, varying degrees of malicious behavior around it, but that's a fact of the matter. And so what we wanted to do is we created this thing called the U.S. Digital Registry, which combined previous repositories that we had. But there's a site that you can go, and anybody know what an API is by chance? All right, that's fine. More of a gentleman over there looks like he does. But so it's a data generating repository. So it's not just internally us having a list of all official social media accounts and third-party accounts and mobile apps in government. It's the fact that anybody can use this to self-identify and make sure that it's official. So now we've already talked with, like, for instance, Facebook and Twitter and Google about them being able to use this repository for being able to authenticate and make sure that what's an official presence and not. That's one road to gaining and maintaining the trust with the public on engagement. As they said in Back to the Future, where we're going, we don't need roads. Because, am I that old? Am I the only one who knows Back to the Future here? I mean, tough audience. Because the idea is creating systems and information and public services that you don't have to search for in that sense. You just say, for instance, you could use this registry and be like, I'd like to know every public service account and be able to get that information. I want it in the Spanish language too. Everything in the Spanish language about public health for veterans. It pulls, it doesn't matter, so you don't have to hunt by agency. You don't have to hunt through the different platforms themselves. This removes the bureaucracy of government from the citizen experience with these apps, and it removes the bureaucracy of the technology platforms themselves. But what does that mean? So actually take a look. If you go inside, it's easy enough. So this is what you see if you go in as a government employee, which actually any of you can go in if you authenticate through max.gov. Basic security features on that. But we're able to go in and you see, well, there's Facebook accounts, there's Pinterest, SlideShare. Believe it or not, back in the day, there was MySpace in this. And I was like, we must delete that, lest there's going to be articles about government's on MySpace still. We've got to come up with a better word than this than social media. Because you say the word social media and people have gut reactions to it. It's like, I know social media. But that's why, like I said, we have talks like this and it's important guidance comes out. But yeah, so we can break it down by agency, by account, by username, status, across the board. Now, to give you an idea, so originally we set the goal of having 6,000 accounts in this by leap day. We blew past that like champagne at brunch and crossed past 7,000 accounts in a week and a half. And now we're on our way to 10,000 accounts. And soon I project we'll top out at about 15,000 accounts in a month or so. That is double the amount of third-party and social media accounts that many in government themselves thought that we had. So just to be able to show the impact of this and the breadth is that a lot of times government itself isn't aware collectively of how much we rely on this already. Not as an option, but as the standard upon which we're building on. This is what helps. And I'll give you an example then. So 10,000 accounts if we're about to reach that. So this is 10,000 sparklers. But the idea that, just to visualize it, but the idea again is that, okay, and I got time too. This is working out well. I'm supposed to pass this off at 11:15. But the idea, as you know, is that every single one of these accounts, this isn't a PDF. When we're talking about 10,000 PDFs or 10,000 static data sets or something like that, each one of these every day is a living, breathing, potentially explosive, sometimes life-saving, otherwise impactful piece of information. It's living. This is what 10,000 sparklers look like when they're on fire. This could, if OGE hadn't stepped up, if many of us hadn't done the things that we did, this is what all of this stuff on fire would look like on a given day, and this would probably be on everyone's desk in that sense. So there's explosive potential here. Now, just combining these resources and allowing, because I'll tell you right now how every single one of you could start using the registry, is that so now for the first time, there's a central repository that connects an account to a person. Now we can start targeting our training and dissemination of policies easier because eventually we could build this out where OGE could send the new policies directly and confirm the receipt to every single person who manages an account. I mean, that's pretty targeted right there. Also, we could start building the guidance in itself for ethics. So when somebody goes to add an official account, a menu comes up. Did you read OGE's guidance on ethics? It brings the services, once again, not just to the people, but as you, as professionals, allows you to ensure that the information you need your agencies to know, that they are receiving it, that it is confirmed, and hopefully that will mitigate just some of the risk, because as we know, in this field, there was no mitigating 100% risk on it. We can only do as much as we possibly can, but there's always going to be that end factor that we have to be prepared for. So just the idea of bringing this together, so we got great feedback. Programmable Web called it the most important in social media advancement in government in 4 years. I don't know what happened 4 years ago. It must have been like Taco Tuesday or something like that. It must have been a really good day. So TechCrunch called it the biggest social media initiative ever. People forget that the US government is probably the single largest employer of social media professionals there is. In that sense. So it is funny to sit on panels and stuff and people are like, well, I think it's just a fad. I'm like, are you kidding me? I mean, this is, you're already using this stuff, and it just, because once again, people hear the word social media, so they think sending out tweets and Facebook posts on their behalf. But there's collaborative platforms like Slack, there's code sharing sites like GitHub. This is something that touches most all government employees right now, whether they know it or not. Harvard called it an evolutionary step in open government, and ethics is a key part of the Open Government Initiative. And when we talk, is anyone familiar with the open government programs? Transparency, responsiveness, engagement, it's good government. It's the kind of government you wake up in the morning and you'd like to believe in. You tell your family on Thanksgiving that this is the type of government. It's that great government. That's open government. And so once again is to be able to have this level of accountability and to make sure that information and policies on ethics can get to every single one of the people there are thousands of people managing this, offers us a new level of service internally. People are already building off of it right now. When we get out of here, I get to go and demo this new emergency management platform that's being built off this authenticated data. Because once again, by blending and defragmenting the data and providing a one-stop shop, we're opening up an exciting new level. Some people say, is this passé now? I promise you the most exciting advancements are yet to come, but they are going to come quickly, and they will fundamentally change the government to citizen engagement pattern. And people are working on this. This is not a government employee. This is a private sector person. He looks quite intelligent. He's writing stuff I don't understand. But because that's the whole thing is, it's not just us building it out as government. It's us empowering the public, empowering companies to provide solutions so we don't have to pay for it. And so, in fact, it's kind of like the weather service model. How many people go to the National Weather Service website to check their weather every day? No, you don't. Put your hand down. Because what do? You go to your app on your iPhone. Maybe you watch it with Michael and Kelly, or CNN or something like that. But all of that originates from government data. Government data that is so accessible, so voluminously distributed that people can build off all sorts of programs, so you can't escape finding out about the weather using government data. But if somebody asked you in a survey, do you use government data to get your weather, they probably wouldn't know. So I'm particularly, any time that my golden triad, as I call it, is government data and information and engagement used by innovators, small businesses, and startups to positively affect and have measurably good outcomes for citizens. If we can do those three things, it's a good cup of coffee day in that sense. And also part of it is when we're engaging, when we're talking about the ethics of this, it's not just responding to tweets and stuff. For instance, so we got feedback on the registry itself starting day one. The engagement wasn't public on a tweet or anything, but that relationship between companies and citizens and government, it's live, it's active, it's a fantastic thing. But also, we constantly have to think about what is the public-private partnership? What are the ethics around this? How can we be more transparent in this so there's not like endorsements? What you were laughing at earlier when you were saying, when we're mentioning certain companies, what's that fear? Because we have to, the people in my community must work every day with the public, the private sector, innovators to create these programs. But we also have to do so in a way, again, that is transparent and ethical. And that is an incredible challenge sometimes, but one, of course, that we must face. Some of the things that we're talking about coming down the line specifically you can start seeing, hopefully sooner than later, still have some arms to twist on this. But imagine a records and archiving system for every third-party application coming out of the United States government that is publicly and available internally. Because right now, agencies piecemeal have to find ways in which to address the Records Keeping Act using applications that are not designed to cater to our laws that need archiving and records, as we talked with like Snapchat and Periscope and things like that. So using this registry, we hope to build things like a unified records keeping and archiving system for all of this across all agencies, a shared analytics platform. We can start having dashboards that show trending topics, be able to show engagements, how many questions are being asked, to have that transparency. Once again, people didn't even know how many accounts there were in the government. Forget about once we start breaking down information and learning things from it and learning how we can make our programs better for it. This is something we hope to do quite soon. And of course, things like integrated platforms that once again bring that level of engagement into location-based services. My dream on it is I always wanted to recreate the Red Cross's Social Command and Control Center, but on the dashboard of a Tesla automobile. And so we can do that, actually, and that's part of the demo I'm going to after this. So if you think that that's exciting and fun, get ready for a fantastic springtime. But that's the idea, is that the future of this engagement, it's not just Justin on his computer responding to a tweet from somebody out in Colorado. The idea is that someone's going to be in their automobile and is going to be able to get targeted location-based information sent to them that then, through the nature of social data, they're going to be able to respond to, engage with, ask questions of. This is true not just, I use emergency management as an example because there's nothing, I think, more tangible and obvious to show both the opportunities and risks than the programs that could potentially be the difference between saving somebody's life. And that's why we're focusing on that first. But ultimately, these things that we talk about are going to become applicable to every public service that there is. Challenges. I'm going to bring it back to him now. After this, we can get into questions and things like that. So thank you very much.
So now you can see why I skipped a couple of slides to get to Justin.
I'm 1 minute off too. That's
no, I think you deserved it. So obviously, as Justin indicated, one, there are amazing opportunities with social media, and it is very important that we don't miss those because we're too concerned or too focused on the challenges. We have to do this in a compliance framework. We have to think about how we're complying with the laws, best practices, and regulations, and this applies in the ethics world as well, but there are many pieces of the compliance framework that we have to make sure that we're in line with. Now, it sounds like GSA is trying to take that off our hands, which would be great, right?
No. I'm wrapping it in a ribbon and giving it right to you.
That's exactly right. So that will be a wonderful day when Justin and his team have the capability to give us some real powerful archiving tools, and until then, we're going to have to do it ourselves. And so I want to share with you some of, especially with official use of social media, some of the challenges, some of the compliance challenges that we have, some of the areas of law that we need to keep in mind when we're using social media. Now, we're going to talk about standards of conduct, but I want to hold those off for a little bit because I think you're going to have some questions. So I'd like to put that towards the end so that we can have a more fulsome discussion about that. But there are other things. Records keeping is a huge issue. Right after our last summit, the Presidential and Federal Records Act amendments of 2014 came into play, and those made it very clear in statute that digital and electronic records can qualify as federal records. That was NARA's viewpoint beforehand, but this makes it clear in the statute. There's also some electronic messaging services provisions in that bill. So if you're using Facebook Messenger or Twitter DM, you're doing a direct message, and NARA's put out guidance on this part of the statute. If you're doing that over a private account, but it's official business, you have to get that into the official record-keeping system, either at the time that you do it or promptly thereafter. And that's Bulletin 2015-2 that NARA put out. There are appropriations law questions. There are riders in appropriations law bills limiting the use, for example, of appropriations for covert propaganda or grassroots lobbying. GAO actually looked recently at EPA on this issue, and so I commend you to look at that report. They found that there might have been some Anti-Deficiency Act violations because of the way that EPA went about doing some tweets related to the waters of the United States rule. So I would just, look at it. It's just something to think about from a compliance standpoint, and creating the control environment that you want over your official accounts. There are Paperwork Reduction Act issues if you're seeking information from the public. There are security issues. You saw the ISIL photograph up there. Cyber vandalism, that's a concern that we have. Another quick story, the Associated Press, I think it was a year or two, maybe or so, got hacked, and there was a story about the White House being attacked. And there was a market effect. there was actually a huge dip in
500 points
Yeah,
a
five-
day. Billions of dollars were wiped off the market because
Yeah.
of a fake tweet.
and it's a real concern. Making sure that that we can have the right security protocols around the use of this, which can include, making sure that only authorized people have access to these social media sites. There are a lot of other things. If you want to know about the Hatch Act, I would point out that we live streamed the whole session on the Hatch Act earlier today, where they had many questions about social media. I thought it was wonderful. I sat in on it. And so I'm alleviated from having to answer those questions because hopefully you'll be able to see that online. And then one that I think is a real big issue, as we come to the presidential transition, a lot of social media accounts are, official social media accounts are not just the, what I would call, the keystone account, the major account, the one that you think is the face of the agency. Many of them are associated with individuals within your organizations. You might have a deputy secretary or something that has an official account that's keyed into him or her. What are you going to do with that account when that person leaves? That's a tough question. We've gotten that question at OGE. Other people have that question. It's coming on the horizon. And I think you need to start thinking about how to decommission those accounts, how to either put them into an inactive status or transfer them over to the next person that's going to hold that position. Those are really the best options that are available. And I think that's really someplace that we need to look. And I know were you guys looking into ways to deal with this?
So this is something that happens all the time. And because, first off, there's no unified way or approach that's been identified across government for handling it. And even said, each platform is different. So on Twitter, you could just change the name on it. Things keep going, so you go from one official to the next official. They keep, the followers, which there's been lawsuits that show that the followers themselves have a monetary value, et cetera. But then you go to Facebook, and they actually discourage that. And their idea, the way their platform is made, is that they're like, okay, like for instance, when Colin Powell was at the Joint Chiefs, he had an account, and then he took his account with him. It wasn't his official account anymore. I mean, it was still his personal account. Then they're like, then the next person creates a new account from scratch. Well, that's fantastic for somebody leaving, but it's really crummy for the agency that has to deal with that, because you spend budget and you spend time and information to get people to follow you, so when you need to give them the information, they can receive it. But then these platforms want to fracture it off and make you start from scratch on it. So it's something that's still, actually, there's something with that going on this week. But it's that kind of idea of that we have the challenges of both having something unified across government, and then the fact of there's no unity amongst these apps themselves. And a lot of agencies actually try to treat them like they're contractors. They'll send me an email like, oh, can you tell, X company to do X, Y, and Z? And I'm like, first, no, that's not how it works. That's not how it works at all. And in fact, it's harder for us because so many of these companies make their money off advertisements. And part of our legal negotiations is that every site has to agree to strip advertisements so there's not perceived endorsement. So if you go to an official Facebook page, for instance, which, by the way, we have a fantastic relationship with, they actually remove the advertisements from it. And that's one of the ways you can tell it's an official government account. So imagine going to one of these social media companies and be like, yeah, we'd like to be able to use your program. First off, strip away any way to make money on it, or any, you know what I mean? Actually, you're gonna have to put developer hours, in fact, to making less money off this for us to use. And then we have all these other, standards in the Anti-Deficiency Act and things like that. So when we work with these companies, we have to make sure we come correct and work together amongst agencies, because if not, it's very difficult for us to navigate those waters.
So it's a complicated area. And what I would say is, and what I would say is, it helps to try and think through these issues before they come into fruition, and set a policy beforehand, because you really don't want to deal with these on an ad hoc basis. People like Justin in the government exist to help you through some of these things, and OG helps to talk through some of the issues. Yes, Carrie. Sorry, could you just repeat the question?
Well, one of the and so this is kind of some of the gray areas on it.
Could you repeat the question?
Oh,
so
God,
people can hear at home?
I shall repeat the question. The idea is she was asking what the ethics angle specifically around decommissioning accounts and things like that are. It's, once again, we're getting into, there's a lot of gray areas on this. And the idea is as well, what the public perception is of how we're engaging as the United States government online. And so if you have 1 million people follow, for instance, somebody on an account and they firmly then believe that this is an official government account, and it is, then all of a sudden the next week they take that account with them, and all of a sudden you see the person start sending stuff that otherwise would be a Hatch Act violation. Citizens don't know the difference. They don't. It's not their job to know our bureaucracy. It's our job to make sure that we're conducting ourselves in such a way that not only are we ethical, but people perceive it as such as well, and that they transparently understand it to be so.
So I think Justin gets ethics. I mean, he's got it down right there. That really is an overarching concern. One of those issues where you're taking the account. I think there are some unresolved specific code provision issues that we're still thinking through about government property and what you can do with it, whether there are ways around some of the unauthorized usage issues or not. It's a tricky area, and part of the reason why I think we wanted to do the presentation from a more open compliance viewpoint rather than a specific, this is the standards of conduct when we're talking about official social media, is because really when it comes to official accounts, it's about authorized usage. It's about what the government wants to do with its account. And so it's more of a comprehensive compliance concern that's across a number of different laws and across a number of different areas that could be triggered by something like failing to decommission an account or not transferring it over and having it go to a private citizen. You know, we wouldn't, for example, normally say, okay, you're leaving, you can keep your telephone number. Or, okay, you're leaving, you can keep your BlackBerry, right? So it's a little bit different in the sense of it's not physical, but we are thinking through the issues from an ethics side, and really, if you're just thinking from a return on investment, it's not a good return on investment to let people walk away with your followers and your tweets, which may be records, and you might have to have archived those and so forth.
Yeah, it's not enough to be ethical. We also have to demonstrate that, because social media and engagement itself is built on trust. People are not going to go and engage with their government online if they start seeing or perceiving that there's examples of us being unethical and how we're handling that relationship. One of the great challenges, of course, is when we talk about the conversations going on around privacy. Now, part of what we do is we are bound by the Privacy Act of 1973. There's very specific ways in which we handle and protect personally identifiable information. It's a big deal for us. But when we look at the public conversation on it, perhaps they wouldn't know that our first concern in our community is handling personally identifiable information in a responsible and ethical way. So once again, it comes to that notion of it's not just having accountability internally and us being ethical, but we have to find ways to communicate and demonstrate that. And when there's commissioning and decommissioning and archiving accounts, like one of the ways that Twitter talked about using the registry isn't to verify new accounts, it's to unverify old accounts that are decommissioned, because all of a sudden somebody could take over who's not a government employee, or they're a former government employee, they have the little blue check mark, and all of a sudden they're doing unethical things. Then it devalues the entire relationship between the citizen and the federal government, which is why we have to go that extra yard.
So, so I'm going to move on. So there are some challenges with personal use of social media. The one thing I want to point out on this slide is MSPB and agencies have not been afraid to look at social media for evidence of misconduct. And there are a couple of cases here that I point out. You can look them up. The one that I think is funny, not funny, but the one that I think is interesting, a law enforcement officer had to work on Super Bowl Sunday, didn't want to do that, so he took sick leave. And then he went to Facebook and said, I took off sick leave so I could watch the Super Bowl. And that was used as evidence that he violated the prohibition on abusing sick leave. So I point that out to you. How do you ethics officials deal with these challenges? What's your role in dealing with these challenges? I think there are 3 ways. 1, work comprehensively with others, and actually I'll just go to the slides. Work comprehensively with others to create social media policies for your official accounts. Ethics may be a small part of that, but it's an important piece. And the other compliance side pieces are very important as well. Second, consider your limited use policies. If you don't have them, think about them. You may not think that personal social media use on your property is a great idea, but I can say it's probably the case that somebody has a mobile phone and is checking their personal social media at some time. And it's better to have a policy on that explaining when that's okay and when that's not okay, rather than doing it sort of on a ad hoc, Wild West basis. Second, really think about disclaimer, put a statement on your official sites that it is an official site. That helps make sure that people know that they're going to an official site. Now, clearly the authentication tools are better, but people may not be using those if they're just going for the first time or looking. So this is helpful, and it also distinguishes those official sites from personal sites of your official employees, particularly if you have one official and one personal. And finally, on this slide, remember to contact OGE to determine whether a policy needs to be incorporated into a supplemental regulation. Now, this is not something you have to do all the time, but if you're thinking that your policy is in the ethics area and is going to have standalone independent force of law that you're going to discipline people for it, it's something that we probably want to have a conversation about because this is such a novel area. Second, focus on social media and ethics training. And I don't mean you have to have all your initial ethics orientation on social media, but it's something that I think an ounce of prevention really is worth a pound of cure in this area. People may not be keyed into the distinction between their official and private identities and responsibilities, and it's relatively easy to hand out a list of shoulds and shouldn'ts to your new employees saying, this is social media, here are some things you should do, here are some things you shouldn't do. Why is this important? Because digital natives are going to be the next rush in. Those are people who are used to and grew up with social media. The statistic here is from OPM, 2014, 16% of the federal workforce was millennials. Now there's some indication that that's a fluctuating number, but at some point, we are going to see that there are younger and younger generations that are used to and really into digital media.
Yeah, a funny anecdote on our support of millennials and digital natives in government. I mean, they send me out to speak on behalf of millennials in government. I'm a grown man. I got gray hair in my beard. I mean, these are troubled lines on my face. I'm not a millennial, but it just shows like the resistance sometimes and that ability to empower, because when I learned this when I did the career day at the high school and learned how everyone's perceptions are, it would blow your minds. Yet in a couple years, these are going to be the very people that agencies are targeting to provide better services. Their understanding of the world is so uniquely different and more advanced, and in other ways, not at all. I mean, some things never change. But then when we look at this, if only 16% of the millennials are in the federal workforce, and you got people speaking on behalf of millennials who have gray hairs in his beard, you already know that maybe we're not doing as much as we possibly can do to learn from those experiences and to embrace what we call as the future, but it is today.
And I just like to say it's clear that I'm not a millennial because I shaved this morning.
And finally, understand how the standards of conduct apply to social media use. Now, we put out a legal advisory in April, and really what we wanted to do with this is 3 things. Set out the fact that social media is not exempt from the standards of conduct, and that there are not higher rules for the standards for social media. That this is really an area where we have to look at the way that social media, so the standards of conduct apply in the realm of social media, but that the standards of conduct have not changed. So it's new tools, same rules. It also establishes a framework. We took a groundwork approach. Instead of setting out, these are the platforms, this is how you can use them, bright line rules throughout, what we did is set up a working framework that you can use to look at individual circumstances, factors, presumptions like use of personal social media is personal in nature that will allow you and guide your analysis. And finally, we focused on attribution issues, authorization issues, when you can use it, who can use it, and accountability issues like not using non-public information for private gain. So I have a bunch of slides on specific issues, but I see we're running pretty close to time. Okay, so we have 10 minutes. So instead of going through each one of these, I think I'd rather just open it up for questions right now. And so I will tell the story because this is up. Okay, so this happened a while ago. I think it was 2014, and somebody at EPA, I think it was a junior, not an employee. Okay, so this was not an employee, but this is a story. So let's just use it as a metaphor, and I don't know who's yelling at me right now. But this was somebody who was posting on the official account for the agency, and then forget to log out, I guess, and went to go play a video game. And then got an accomplishment, which apparently was a C-list celebrity in this game, which I guess is an accomplishment.
Wasn't even good at the game.
I don't know. She just started. You have to give her a break. So anyways, this was then sort of either automatically or she selected to have it posted, and it went up onto the Twitter account. Now, this has a huge effect on your brand, right? This affects the way that people look at you. It can affect your reputational risk. It can affect your resources because then you have to deal with this instead of dealing with your mission. And it can bring some real concerns. I think, one of the congressmen that wrote the Clean Water Act sent a tweet saying, I don't know what's going on here.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, and that's a real concern. And there are ways that you can control for this type of thing by putting out an official social media policy that sets out who can use it, when they can use it, and what types of uses are acceptable. So but barring that, because we really only have a little bit of time left, unless you want me to go through the slides, I'm more than happy to just take questions. In the back. Right.
Well, something that affects everybody in this room. He was asking, I can't say it verbatim.
I think the question really is there are a lot of regulations in this area, both on the official use, but also on some things that are, that apply to personal use. Hatch Act and ethics regulations are the two that come to forefront. But there are other things about, protecting yourself from security risks. Not maybe some advice. I think some of the intelligence agencies might put out advice on not using your name or identifying yourself because of those safety risks. So are we thinking about moving towards a government-wide or enterprise-wide sort of concept of getting together and talking about how to put together full social media policies that really list down So I think I'll let Justin take the answer on that. But
You just completely shoveled that onto me. So yeah, and in fact, when we talk about the importance of this is background checks, visa applications. There is efforts right now, programs being developed that in order to get a security clearance, they will check your social media history, things like that. That is coming. It is developing right now. There are all sorts of ways in which ethics must be part of that conversation, not just to protect the ethics of it, but make sure it goes well, because there's reasons for these things being done. And even in the private sector, we hear about people potentially future being able to use social media to be able to, whether they give you a loan or not. Things like that. So once again, is when we talk about the ethics of this isn't just the person or two people in your agency, which I promise you is more than one or two people who are managing this, but it's the idea that this will affect every single employee to some extent in a government agency, of how this is being, and what kind of guidance is there, and also what guidance isn't there. And that's the question. We have to do more and move forward and have conversations like this and get you excited and interested and angry and passionate about this, because there's so much gray area that's unnecessary, and there's so many different ways of interpreting it. We must get ahead of this.
yeah. So as to a larger question about government-wide, I don't know if that has been posed yet. Okay, so we have a recommendation to get it started. But one thing that you can do now is implement that on your enterprise, in your organization. And that's a way to get ahead of the curve, because it may take a little bit of time and some working through some other issues for us to approach it from a government-wide perspective.
One example of something that we did, and we haven't gone far enough with it, is the best example from an agency that I've seen of delineating official, personal, and they created a third category, unofficial, to cover, which is essentially, we know it's your personal accounts, but people are able to identify that you're a government employee, and in fact, we want you to be able to share information and to be able to support the mission, is the United States Coast Guard. Coast Guard put out a fantastic example, which I would invite everyone to check out. And then what we did is, so one of the things we do with the social gov community is we created what's called a policy development toolkit, where we wanted to identify all the rules, regulations, and laws that we're bound by and should be in a social media policy for agencies. We did an analysis of agencies and basically saw it was kind of a little bit snaggletooth, where no agency had 100% of what was covered, but there's no reason not to, because when one agency has it spelled out, we can adapt and plug and play. So we created a shared document that was designed, so this is how to evaluate your policies, and here are key examples of how it's done best by other agencies. So essentially, you could just plug and play into like a super champ #1 policy. So, but the idea is, so if you check out the Coast Guard, they did a really interesting job of delineating on that, of what is unofficial use policy.
Sorry. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, so I think I'll take that question. So we put out guidance on this area.
What's the question?
Oh yes. So the question deals with people who want to highlight stuff that happened in their official capacity on their personal social media. Is that correct? Sort of a truncated version of it. And so if you look at our guidance, really the idea here is if you have a personal social media account and you look at the factors that we set out there about whether a person would reasonably construe that as being officially sanctioned or officially endorsed when it is not officially sanctioned or officially endorsed. And so I think there are some good factors there, and I think it's important for us to look at those, but we also made it clear that you can share public information on your account. It's a little bit of a gray area, and it kind of depends how you do it. If you're plastering your web page with stuff, or sorry, your web page, 1.0 talk. If you're plastering your social media page with things that are just public, are just official capacity things, that does lead to the possible confusion. On the other hand, if you put up once in a while something, that can be okay. You just have to run through the factors. Now, I know there are additional questions, but I'm seeing that I'm getting the big red X. So what I'll say is, if everybody, I'm sure there are lots more questions, please feel free to contact me. My email's online, so you can look me up, or come up afterwards. But thank you so much, and really thank you to GSA. We really appreciate your time, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Welcome back. We hope that you enjoyed the last session. That was a very interesting one, covering really just a whole giant amount of information about social media.
Yeah, it really highlighted how much we've come along in just 10 years. I mean, to think that, one of the questions posed was how many people, were aware of any of these things or had any of these social media platforms 10 years ago. And, almost no one would have said yes, whereas today, of course, almost everyone uses them. So very interesting to see how much it has progressed and has continued to change and progress as we speak.
Yeah, one of the things that I thought was really interesting about that, because, as ethics officials, we tend to think of things strictly in terms of risks. What's the potential risk from doing something? And one of the issues that they brought up was the potential opportunities that you have from using social media. How it can be harnessed to provide even more information to the public in a way that sort of cuts out the middleman,
right?
Which I thought was very interesting.
Right, and what Mr. Herman brought up about using the registry to be able to, to speak directly to people who have been verified and reaching specific audiences was really opened my eyes to see how these things can be used for the benefit of the government overall.
So what do we have on tap for this afternoon, Liz?
So this afternoon we have ethics recommendations for the new administration, and then we'll have gifts and travel, and that'll be with Mr. Lowentritt and Dave Apel.
Okay, great. So we're going to cut away real quick. We've got one more interview for you before we close down this broadcast. We'll be starting up another broadcast, both for here in the auditorium and in the other room, starting at 1:30.
Right. Right, exactly. And then the other room will be streaming leveraging technology to better manage your ethics program, and that's at 12. So join
All
us.
right, so we will see you. Stay here for just another quick interview, and we'll see you later this afternoon.
Good afternoon and welcome back. My name is Patrick Shepard. And before we cut for lunch, we'd like to have a short conversation with Dr. Alex Knight from the CDC, who has been generous enough to stop by and talk to us about how his program uses OGE's training materials in furtherance of their staff development and in strengthening their ethics program. So thanks very much for joining us.
Sure, my pleasure.
Excellent. So I understand that you're relatively new to the ethics program and you had a sort of staff development challenge that you wanted to solve.
Yeah, I joined government ethics just over a year ago, and when I arrived at the office, we looked at the training program that was in place, and we were building our office up. We added 4 professionals last year, and we wanted to put together a program that would allow them to grow into providing acceptable support to our customers. And so we actually said, okay, Thursday afternoon is going to be dedicated ethics training. Lo and behold, again, I was new, started looking for materials and content that I could utilize in the training, and then stumbled across the opportunity that OGE was providing training, and it was usually on Thursday afternoons.
Yep, and we do try and do that so that people can plan their months around it. So on the second and third Thursday of each month, we have one of our broadcasts. We try and do the advanced one at noon because we've heard from the more experienced officials that they have a hard time carving an hour out. So if we can reach them while they're having a sandwich at their desk, they appreciate that. And the fundamental series happens on the second Thursday at 2 p.m. So yeah, it's really good to hear that you guys are able to use the live broadcasts. Are you able to sort of build a broader discussion about how the information matters to your organization, or what kind of opportunities do you find in watching them together?
Well, that's exactly what we do. We look at what's scheduled, and we look at where our organization is as it relates to that subject matter. And we bring all of the ethics specialists together, the advanced ones and the new ones. And what we do, depending on the subject matter, we may start our training before to do some outliers and looking at the slides that they're provided in advance, looking at the outliers to identify information, and then we'll follow along. And when the training is over, we expound on what was covered, utilizing practical exercises and examples that are applicable to our community and our customers directly.
No, I think that's really great because that's something that we can't do. When we're reaching hundreds of people at a time, it's not possible for us to create examples and applications of all of the rules that are specific to what an ethics official in a particular agency might experience. So it seems like by working together, you guys have an opportunity to say, how does this apply to us, and what does it mean for us?
Well, one of the things that my team has looked at is we're in Atlanta. We're away from the government ethics collective as a whole, and so this training has provided us more of a disparate connection to the rest of the community, because you have the entire government ethics community usually participating in this, and so we get to hear questions from the other members of the ethics community that lets my staff know that we're not the only ones having these issues, and some of the other agencies are having questions about some of the same things. So it gives us a great pulse check of where the government ethics community is in general.
No, that's great because it can feel like you're on an island. I know anytime you get even a few miles outside of DC, it feels like a long, long way away from everyone else who is doing this work. But I think that's true. We can use technology to really even things out across the community. We like to think about consistency, accuracy, and timeliness. And by sharing that information among groups and within groups, we can improve on all of those measures. Have you found it to be useful? Because I think one of the challenges that ethics officials share with us all the time is that we are not able to offer the training they need when they need it. You have a new staff member comes in, you have someone who's taking on new responsibilities. We might not get to that class for 6 months or a year or longer. So have you been able to use any of the on-demand resources or the recordings in your professional development?
Well, that's actually one of the things that we do quite frequently. For example, the start of the year with new specialists, we had some specialists, this was their first year engaging in OGE 450. So we were actually able to go to the repository and pull some of the stuff that we did on 450s last year and some of the more extensive stuff on 450s. And I actually got a comment back from one of my junior specialists that has 450s this year, said that the training is very informative and has provided him with a great foundation and where he needs to start looking when doing his first reviews of OGE 450s.
And that's excellent, because I think from our perspective, we want your programs to be as empowered as possible to put the resources you have to work as quickly as possible. So if you can use the tools when you need them, where you need them, that's fantastic for us, and it's great for you as well. And I'd like to invite you, as you go through this process, if you find any gaps, find things that you wish we had a training presentation on that we haven't done, and if any of you watching at home or in your offices come across those gaps, please find a way to let us know, because we really want to be as responsive to the needs of the community as we can, and we really want you to have a comprehensive training program that you can just put to work. You have a new employee, get them up to speed. And
that's one of the things that I definitely like to close with. My staff, we look across that, and so in your flexibility to provide this, one of the things that would probably help the community is, let's say 1 month out of the quarter, you open it up to the field and take recommendations on what training we'd like to see during that period.
Excellent.
And then a follow on to that is, we're a small community in government, the ethics community. And I talked to Mr. Schaub about this yesterday. He and I had a brief discussion in the hall. If there was an opportunity of a comprehensive training program that was put together and offered by your office or one of the other departments that we could all collectively come to for the managers maybe twice a year, and for this ethics specialist maybe quarterly, there probably could be some benefit to the agency, to the government at large for such a program.
No, I think that's a great idea, and something we've been working on is providing biannual symposia where we can all get together for a day or a couple of days and talk about issues of import to the community. And I think we're planning to do one of those in the late summer, early fall. So if you guys have suggestions, please let us know. And I think we should probably go have some lunch so we can get back for the next session.
Agree. Yes, sir.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much for joining us.
It was my pleasure.
Excellent.
Thank you.
See you after lunch.